Well, but he's just not a teacher. Black people now want to be taught. They don't want to be just spoken to. They want to learn something now. They want to clear the smoke.
So what is his purpose?
You have to ask him that. You can't ask me what his Minister of Farrakhan's purpose. You have to go to him and ask him that.
Good. Oh, I got feedback somewhere. Whoa. What is happening to my technical difficulties? Thank you guys for hanging back. That was crazy. That was super weird right there, people. I don't know what that was right there, but thank y'all for hanging in there. Talk about technical difficulties. Jeez, man, that was crazy. I don't know. It was a glitch. All right, here we go. You guys should be able to hear me now. I don't know what that was. Shit happens. That was weird. That has never happened in the time I've been doing this shit. So anyway, we back. We're gonna have a pretty interesting, cool show today. I felt the need to cover this subject for so many reasons. Um, you guys already know my historical references. You guys know how important I think that history is. So this is my contribution. Um, every time I come on here to give you guys a little bit of history, or try to do my best. So as we always do, we'll hop over to this chat and see who's in the chat. That was weird though, bro. Like that. I don't like weird stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? That was crazy. Yeah. Maybe it's like, hey, leave us alone. All right, who we got in the chat? True King always checking in, man. Appreciate you, bro. Always being there, man. Tapping in. Um, and I would assume the only way that people like True King and so many others know when to tap in is when that clicking that button, clicking that little bell over on YouTube, which gives you notification. You guys have to get notified. Get notified. The boys on the air. And I try to do my best to put it inside the actual quotes too. So hold on. Trying to get my virtual background set up. For whatever reason. It's tripping on the brother. I don't know. None of my options working on it. So True King in the building. Rising Phoenix is always in the building. What's good? What's up? What's up to Rising Phoenix? Who else we got in the building? Sam Stone, 4141. Peace and love. He's back. My guy D Nice. D Nice, I have not forgot about you, brother. Um, things are moving so quick and so fast, such high propensity. I got you in queue for your hoodie. I promise you. I got you coming. Baby girl in the building. Hey, nice to see you. I was working on a clip. I was working on a clip earlier from yesterday when you and brother Antoine was on here building yesterday when he was reading your numbers. I'm putting together like a montage joint for TikTok. I'll be sure to share it on my on my YouTube page too. But it was y'all was going back and forth with the numbers and the name. We're gonna do that every Sunday, by the way. Every Sunday. Ain't no roll tide. Ain't no roll tide. It's how about them dogs? How about them dogs? Nah, it's all love. Shouts out to Alabama. Alabama in the building. Mr. Hopkins. What's going on, brother? Haru, peace and love. Oh, yeah, that was earlier. Technical difficulties, that's all it was. And she's in the building, so if she's in the building, we can definitely get started at this point in time. So I think we ready to go. Cool. All right, so Black founding fathers of the 1800s. One of the key things I want us to focus on today is a lot of the misnomers. And I'm pretty sure you guys have heard the term misnomer before, but there's a lot of misnomers out there. And then there's a projective way of how they teach history to our people. And there's a perceived way of history that I think that that we've been forced to embody for so long because we're not told the entirety of history or even what that may look like. History, I mean. So I like to bring forth history as it's taught versus history the way it should be taught. I'm gonna keep myself in a small box over here for today, but you guys can see the whole entire screen. Now, if I were to say to you guys and ladies in the audience, if I were to ask Any of you? Chief Cali, man, I tried to call you, brother. I tried to call you, man. I be hitting you up in the chat, man. I don't ever get any response, but shouts out to Chief. Shouts out to Chief Cali in the building. Waiting on a documentary, man. Brother got a dope documentary docu-series going on right now. I'm involved in that docu-series too, by the way. So check it out, man. It's dope. Shouts out to the clan. Shouts to the squad, man. So if I would ask you all, what's the first thing come to your mind when I say 1800s? Involving Black people. When I say Black people of the 1800s, in the chat, just give me the first thing that comes to mind. Negroes of the 1800s. Negroes of the 1800s. I want you guys to just write the first thing that comes to your mind in the chat. And I'm gonna make note. I'm gonna make note of what you put in the chat. So right now in the chat, when I say the word Negroes of the 1800s, okay, we got farmer. We got farmer. We got cotton. Good, good, good. Keep it coming. What else y'all got? Antebellum. Ooh, that's real good. People hardly ever talk about the antebellum period. Antebellum period. Slavery, of course. Slavery. Black slave owners. Yep. Slave owners. And I'm right now with what y'all are saying. Segregation. Right then a couple more. Segregation. Oppression. Oppression. Civil War. Good, good, good. You guys are doing amazing. Landlord. Great, great. Okay, great. Emancipation. Another good one. So thank you, Tony. So this is about what I had predicted. 1800s, Negroes of the 1800s. Automatically, we got farmers, cotton, sharecropping is a great one. Sharecropping or farming. I got farming, cotton, landlord, antebellum, slavery, Civil War, sharecropping, Black slave owners, oppression, emancipation. Those are the terminologies you guys gave me and ladies gave me when I asked you. Great question. Great question. Great question. Because I never said great point. I never said anything about North or South. So it's a great point. But you guys see how the psychology, the psychosis of the reference of a term of, come out the kitchen, Jalen. The terminology Negro and then a time frame 1800s. That lets me know that I have not did my due diligence of informing you all of so many great things that were happening in the 1800s for so-called Negroes or Black people. That means that we still don't have a full grasp on the idea that everybody was not under slavery, everybody was not oppressed, everybody was not farmers, everybody was not picking cotton, everybody was not dealing with the Emancipation Proclamation. Like this wasn't a nationwide, well, it was a nationwide situation, enslavement, the system itself, or involuntary servitude. This was a condition itself. Don't get it twisted, but at the same time, family, there was so much so much more shit going on. Now, granted, get your pen and your pad. Pen and pad, please. Just for all my pen and pad gang people out here. Get your pen and pad out. Take notes. If it's your first time being on here with me, thank you for tuning in. But we have work to do. We have to take notes. We have to research. That's if you guys want to understand more of the history of our people. Some people can care less, and that's fine. That means this section of the show is not for you. But those of you who are intrigued or bewildered to the diaspora of the so-called Negroes of America, then this segment is for you. Black founding fathers of the 1800s. Why would I call it such a thing? Why would I label this episode Black founding fathers? And I mean founders. And I really mean founders, Black founding fathers of the 1800s. Shouts out to High Priest. He he left the Wi-Fi smoking yesterday. Smoking. Go back and watch the episode from yesterday if you can get a chance to see it. This brother was on here reading people, just reading their names and reading them. The brother is the human gematria itself. He is the human calculator. Okay, he is the human calculator. I just want to make a point of correction. He said W.E.B. Du Bois. I said 1800s. W.E.B. Du Bois is around the 1900s. W.E.B. Du Bois. We're going to talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. We're also going to talk about people like Martin Delany. Maybe you've heard of Martin Delany, but we're going to talk about who Martin Delany was. Let's talk about these people, who they were. Okay, so let's go on. Of course, when you hear the word terminology, Negroes of the 1800s, your mind automatically go to this picture I got on the screen right here. Come out of the kitchen, Jayla. Sorry, my daughter in the background. She's in the kitchen doing something. Got no business doing. Hold on, y'all. Five-year-old, man. She the pandemic baby boy. Kids are crazy. So slavery, farming, cotton, antebellum, sharecropping. These are all the terminologies that you all produce when I ask you, when I say the term Negroes of the 1800s, the brother pointed out earlier, North or South. Why does that matter? I'm going to ask you guys, why does it matter? Negroes of the 1800s, North or South? And I'm not being slight. Like, I really want to find out what you guys think of your people in North America in the 1800s. All those things y'all said, do all those things only apply to the South? Antebellum is associated with the South automatically. Farming could be the South, right? I'm sure farms are up north too. Otherwise, they couldn't survive. Farms were more prominent in the South. Okay. But does it matter North or South? What do you guys think? Does it matter North or South? And when I ask, does it matter? Asking the question, if I was born in 1800s in New York, and you was born in 1800s in Mississippi, would there be a disadvantage based on where we were born at? Or were we doing the same thing no matter where we were, North or South? Were the Southern Negroes slower, dumber than the Northern Negroes? Or were the Northern Negroes really the Southern Negroes who migrated? Great freaking point. Great freaking point. That's a great point. The laws matter. And on your paper, you know, we got to put our time and space. So put down 1829 to 1930. 1829 to 1930. That's the time period we're going to talk about today. 1829 to 1930. This is important to put your timestamp on it. Make sure y'all tap in and share this. Something's going on with the algorithms. I talked to Brother Crum yesterday about this, and we're just noticing that our views are really, really low. So right now we're streaming across Facebook, Crum TV, YouTube, MOI YouTube. If you're watching from any of those platforms, please do us a favor and hit that share button. It doesn't cost you anything. We're not soliciting for funds. Just hit the share button. Share that shit across as many of your friends as you can right now to help get these numbers up, because YouTube is doing a thing, I think, with the shorts. as it was explained to me, which is affecting the overall viewership of these amazing shows and this amazing information. So hit that share button, hit that like button, tap it, hit the hearts as frequent as you can. Y'all already know I'm not here for entertaining. I'm here to teach. We're here to learn. So pen and pads out, take notes, hit the share button, and help support. The brother said, yes, by the laws. Laws. So right under 1829, 1930, write down the word law. Law, L-A-W. Put a little mark beside it. Right under your piece of paper. You can't really see it. I got 8. You can't really see it, but right 1829, right below it, put law. Right below the word law, write out the word literacy. Literacy. Write out the word literacy. So 1829 to 1930, right below that, put the word law, then put the word literacy, as in literate, literacy. Right before the word literacy, put civil rights. Civil rights. And I find it interesting when I ask you guys the words Negro as associated with the 1800s. Nobody said anything about Black wealth. Nobody said anything about civil rights. Nobody said anything about Black banking. Nobody said anything about that. And this is not me, throwing shade on y'all. This is just highlighting how we all think, or how we were all trained to think. Now, I don't have time to get into the education system of America when it comes to so-called Negroes and the education system as a whole, as it relates to people like John Rockefeller, the Carnegie, and Horace Grant. We won't get into them today. But why didn't anybody say anything about Black wealth? Because we're not taught to associate this time period with Black wealth. We're not taught to associate this time period with anything positive. Because you have to understand, the time period we have on here is 1829 to 1930. A lot happened with us in that time frame. And the reason there's such a gloominous, mischievous, evil history taught in that time frame. Remember, I said 1829. Right after 1829, you guys can create a timeline if you want. Right after 1829, 1830, 31, the Indian Removal Act was happening, remember? The Indian Removal Act happened in 1830. And remember the other day, I was showing you guys there were no such thing as Native American plantations or Indian plantations. There were no Indian plantations or Native. When I pulled up Indian plantations, these same pictures came up. Native American plantations or Native Americans on plantations. These same pictures came up right here. There were no red people out there with feathers. These people came up. So 1829 to 1930. This is part of what's called the Golden Age. Golden Age. I want you guys to write down Golden Age. Golden Age. This was the Negro Golden Age. See, you guys may have heard of the Golden Age for the Romans, the Golden Age for the Greeks, the Golden Age, the Age of Discovery for Europeans, the Renaissance era for Europeans. You have a Renaissance era. You also have a Renaissance era. So we'll talk about our Renaissance, our Golden Age. And after today, after I brand, let me get my speaker right. Hold on, y'all. There we go. Put it back on my headphones. After I brainwash you all today with this information to show you the Black Renaissance, the Black brilliance, and the reason I went to the 1930 because the 1920s, you get Harlem Nights, you get the Harlem Renaissance. This is the 1920s. 1865, according to history, as they told you, you was just in chains and bondage. How 40 something, 60 something years later, you got on these nice suits and top hats and you gambling and you got your own spot in Harlem. And how does Harlem become one of the beacons for Negro progress of the early 1920s? How does places like Mound Bayou of Mississippi becomes the beacon of the South for Black wealth and Black prosperity in the late 1800s? Why is civil rights the conversation in 1865 to 1896? This is not 1965, 66, 64, 62 civil rights. This is the civil rights of the 1860s. Everything they've told you in reverse. So if today, let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. Let's make this deal between me and you guys. And I want all of you in the chat, only if you agree. Only if you agree. If you don't agree, it's okay. Y'all know I'm not here to convince or persuade anybody. This is just information. But we're gonna go for about 2.5 hours. So I don't know if y'all on lunch break right now. It's a federal holiday. I don't even know what the holiday is. I don't keep up with their holy days anymore. So if you have to go to work today, congratulations. I'm about to go in for about 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes, whatever it takes. A hook or crook to convince you, to show you that the negroes of the 1800s were not the people you see on the screen right. Not that these people were not. These people are just at work. So I don't feel any way about this picture on the screen because these people are just at work. Like they're literally just at work, working. No different than you working inside the warehouse for Amazon or Uber, Lyft driver, whatever you do for work. It's no different than that. Physically, it's a lot different, of course, but as it relates to people at work. And the guy on the horse, the flugeroid gentleman on the horse right here, probably just a real shitty manager, supervisor. How many of you guys have had some real shitty supervisors before? Some horrible managers, right? And that's why I made this statement. If there was an HR, if there was an HR back at this time period, there was an EO department back in this time period, you probably would have never heard of slavery in the manner you heard about it. But unfortunately, there was not an HR or EO department back then. Why do I make that point? They make work-related history, a working relation history in the United States of a certain group of people. Your working relations as it relates to the United States, we're the only people where our working relationship is taught as human history to us. Nobody talks about the Irish and their working history when they first got here, or the Italians and their working history. They didn't have work when they got here. They're a bunch of vagabonds, a bunch of gangsters running through the streets. We don't talk about the Juicies that were up in Chicago, the Purple Gang who were running hooch across from Canada to America, bootlegging, killing cops, murdering cops, unaliving people. We don't talk about the Purple Gang, aka the Juicies, and their ruckus in the early 1900s, late 1800s in America. It's only your story where they take your working relationship, your relationship as a contributor to the society and the structure of America. They take that history and convert it or pervert it into something like this on the screen, to where you become ashamed. To where if I tell you, give me the first thing that come to your mind when I say Negroes of 1800s, the first thing out of your mouth is farmers, cotton, landlords, laborers, antebellum, slavery, Civil War, blacks owning slavery, other slaves, segregation, oppression. Emancipation. While all these words are associated with some parts of a history of the 1800s, that lets me know how much we know and don't know about that time period. And that time period becomes very, very important to me because upon my studying and researching, in my humble opinion, this is the time period we should be studying the most. Because this is the time period where we got duped as a collective, as so-called negroes, African Americans, blacks, whatever the nomenclature, us people, we got duped. We got freaking duped. And I'm like, why are they pushing this on our people? Why are they pushing these images on our people of that time period? They got some folks out in the field that look like you, strangely enough. They look like you. Then we got some of y'all claiming to be Native American ancestry. But when I pull up Native Americans in the cotton field, Native Americans on the plantation, or Indians on the plantation, they show the exact same picture, the exact same people. When we talk about people land getting taken away, you know somebody's land got taken away. That much everybody can agree to. That much everybody can agree to. Some land got taken from some people. And there's no debate about how long them people been on that land before it got taken. It's not up for debate. How long they been there, but it don't matter how long they been there. They were there first. How about that? How about that? They were there first. So on today, only if you agree, let's enter into contract in the comments. I want not don't just hear what I gotta say first. Press 111 if today you can commit to making a donation in the Cash App. What we on today? $3 challenge, I think. $3 challenge. $3 challenge today. If by the end of this, if by the end of my ranting and presenting information, if by the end of this I have otherwise moved or persuaded you to think otherwise, when you now hear the term negroes of the 1800s, you would no longer think about emancipation. You would no longer think about farmers. You would no longer think about cotton. You would no longer think about antebellum. You would no longer think about none of these negative connotative words. I'm going to bound these words up and I'm going to cast them out. I'm going to put new words in your mind to think about your people of the 1800s. But it won't be this. So much so, to the next time you see this photo after today, drop a 111 in the comment if you can commit to the $3 challenge, if you're so persuaded to feel like you got new information. If you can commit to that, we're gonna move on. But I guarantee you, after today, you will no longer view these photographs the same. And my objective is not to disprove these photographs. My objective is to move your mind away from thinking this is all that was happening in the 1800s. This is not all. This is not all that was happening. Was this happening? Of course, it was happening. It's work, and more of this was happening after the Civil War than during or before the Civil War. A lot of this continued to happen, unadulterated. The prison exchange program was called the chain gang. This stuff continued to happen for free. See, the time period they're really talking about slavery and explaining slavery throughout history and how Negroes in the cotton cases, a lot of those people were sharecroppers and tenant farmers. If you just stop and think for a second, in 1830, when Andrew Jackson pushed these people off the land, what was the condition of the land that they wanted it so bad? Like what was the condition? Why didn't they go somewhere else? Excuse me. Why did these YT palm colored people squatters, why did they want to come to Georgia territory and Alabama territory? Because of the rich, fertile soil that was already there. And these people of color had already tilled the soil, already cultivated the soil, had already been growing stuff on that soil already. They didn't have any almanacs. They knew when to plant, they knew when not to plant, they knew when it was time to harvest. They knew the land. These people you see knew the land. Nobody else knew the land. These people knew the land. If anybody in the comments has ever attempted to grow a garden of any substance, I don't mean just a box garden. I mean an actual couple yards, couple feet. That's just some hard work. Once you get it going, it's cool. Tilling the soil, fertilizing the soil, you know what I'm saying? Knowing how to plant, when to plant, making your rows, getting the adequate water to it, the harvesting of that product to where it grows back the next season. Cotton only grew in certain seasons. Cotton only grew in certain seasons. So they weren't picking cotton year round, y'all. What were they doing other times? All the field hands when there was because you can't grow cotton year round. You can't grow nothing year round. Well, you can now because of how they GMO'd everything, but the true naked natural seed of any product, vegetable, does not grow year round. If they had 100, 200 supposed Negroes in these large plantations, large pieces of these acreage of this plantation had to lay dormant for a while. You can't keep planting on the same soil every single year. That's what I'm saying. We have to take basic agricultural disciplines to understand that you can't plant on that shit all year round. What were they doing when they were not planting? What else was happening with these people? And why are they making a laborious part of history seem like this is your history? If they only showed those Irish YT people in coal mines and that and they permeated the Irish culture with those images and stories, giving them the notion that this is your history based on what you were doing in that time frame. Imma ask one more question to the comment box. It's gonna be a yes or no question. In this time period between 1829 and 1930, could Negroes read and write? Yes or no? Could they read and write? Listen to the question. Could Negroes read and write between the 1820s and 1930s? Yes or no? Just give it an educated guess. Could Negroes read and write between the 1820s and 1930s? Yes or no? What do you think? You think Negroes could read and write back then? I'm not asking you about the legality of it. Could they read and write? Yes or no? That's all I want to know. D Nice says no. Ronell said no. We got a couple yeses in there. The question is, during this time frame, the 1820s, 1930s, could Negroes read and write? I'm not talking about the legality of it. Okay. Some, yes. Okay. We got a couple yeses in here. We got a couple yeses in here. We got a few no's. D Nice said most said no. I'm gonna go with D Nice answer. Most could not read or write. Most couldn't read or write. Most couldn't. So whether you said yes or no, either way, you guys are right. Yes, everything was written in different language. That's why they weren't able to understand it. They messed us over with CBAs. Oh, the CBAs, yeah, the ABCs. It's crazy. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Jim Stone said yes in teaching their folks. All right, let's get into the measure. Let's see what black ownership looked like at that time period. Let's 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 discuss a little bit about black ownership. Then I'm gonna walk backwards through history from there. Let's talk black ownership real quick. Hold on. Black ownership. In the United States, black-owned businesses or black business, also known as African American business, originated in the days of slavery before 1865. So black businesses was already in full effect before 1865. And again, historically, what they'll do is they'll paint the picture of cotton picking people of color. Then they'll do the emancipation. Then they'll bring you Civil War. Then they bring you what was after that historically? Um oh, they jump right to the 1960s. And that's typically what our people know historically. Emancipation and civil rights permitted businessmen to operate inside the American legal structure starting in the Reconstruction era. So on your piece of paper, write down Reconstruction era. That's gonna be that's an important time in history for your people. Write down Reconstruction era, 1863 to 1877. That's important. I think I already got it written down. I think I do. I didn't. Reconstruction era, and these are gonna be a point for you to go back and look over later and really do some digging on your own. But I promise you, it's gonna open up a lot of avenues of thinking. 1863 to 1877 was the Reconstruction era, and we can talk more about the Reconstruction era. But just understand, after the Civil War, post Civil War, there was a time called the Reconstruction era. No, they were not building buildings and putting up structures. That's not the kind of reconstruction you're thinking about. If that was the case, in order for them to reconstruct it, they had to construct it in the first place, and they never constructed anything, right? But what they did construct was society, and political, social and political. So the Reconstruction era was social and political. So right underneath Reconstruction, 1863 to 1877, write down the word social and political. Those two things were being reconstructed. The sociology, social studies, and the politics of the South was being reconstructed. Even as we talk about this right here, I don't want you guys to think that the Union, don't think that the Union were the hero. Like the Union soldiers in Lincoln and the Union, the North, they were not the heroes of this story. I'm gonna show you a couple of heroes of the story, but just don't think about the Union or the North being the liberators, because I can show you where Union soldiers took your ancestors and down what's called the Devil's Punch Bowl and brutally starved and murdered unalived people of color, Union soldiers. So the Union or Lincoln do not get the credit for being the rock stars of this story. They're not the rock stars of the story. By the 1890s, thousands of small businesses operations had opened in urban areas. Black businesses were thriving in this time frame post and pre-Civil War. That means see right here, African American businesses originated in the days of slavery before 1865. That means everything prior to 1865 counts. That's why our timeline from when we first started the live, I said 1829 to 1930. That's why I said 1829. We don't go back that far. 1829 is only a stone throw from the 1700s. Anybody born in the late 1700s was still alive in 1829. So 1829 is a stone throw away from what? 1775, the Revolutionary War. 1829 is a stone throw away from 1790, which was the first census, also the European Naturalization Act. Okay, so I want to shrink these time frames so you don't think these was like thousands of years ago, and this was like so long. This is only like four maybe five generations away. Four maybe five generations away. Like I know who my grandmother mother is. So that's my great great grandmother. I'm sorry, that's my great grandmother. I'm familiar with my great grandmother. My great grandmother was alive when I was younger. So that's two generations away. Two more generations past my great grandmother, we were running businesses. And they were doing this shit without SBA. No slight at SBA, Small Business Association. No no slight to them. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if Frederick Douglass had a newspaper, who the hell was reading newspaper? If this was a black owned newspaper, who was reading newspaper besides white people? You know they're not supporting the black owned newspaper. Who supported Frederick Douglass newspaper? Had to be readers. Had to be a whole lot of readers because the newspaper this shit went on for a nice little hot minute. Who was reading Frederick Douglass newspaper? So even though they make us think that people of our stature and color were illiterate back then and could not read and write, it was illegal for negroes to read and write, and y'all couldn't read and write, and all this crazy nonsense. That's psychoneurosis. That's the psychoneurosis. If you think you're not affected by psychoneurosis, yes, you are. Yes, you are. That's the only question I got. Who the hell was reading Frederick Douglass newspaper? Let's continue. By the 1890s, thousands of small businesses operations had opened in urban areas. This is 1890, so we have not got to 1920. We haven't got to Tulsa yet, Tulsa, Oklahoma. You can make a side note of Tulsa, right down 1920s, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We'll talk about Black Wall Street in a minute. I know, again, we're given certain stories. We're given certain parts of history, so we don't go investigate other parts of history. If they just gave you Tulsa, Oklahoma, would have never really known about the two places I'm talking about today. I haven't got to those yet, but I'm telling you. The most rapid growth came near the early 20th century as increasingly rigid Jim Crow system of segregation moved urban blacks into communities of large enough to support a business establishment. The National Negro Business League. The National Negro Business League was an American organized foundation founded in Boston in 1900s by Booker T. Washington to promote the interests of African American businesses. The mission and main goal of the National Negro Business League was to promote commercially, what it says, was to, let's read it again. Promote the interests of African American business. The mission and main goal of the National Negro Business League was to promote the commercial and financial development of the Negro. It was recognized as composed of Negro men and women who have achieved success along business lines. It grew rapidly with 320 chapters in 1905 and more than 600 chapters in 34 states by 1915. In 1966, the league was renamed and reincorporated in Washington, D.C. as the National Business League, which remains in operation. How many of y'all heard about the National Business League? And how many of you guys knew it was the National Negro Business League at one point in time? Fine, distinguished black men. Executive Committee of the National Negro Business League, 1910. Circa 1910. NNBL founder Booker T. Washington, 1856 to 1915, is seated second from the left. That'd be that handsome young brother right here. Very distinguished brothers. Very distinguished brothers. Negro Business League, write that down, was founded in 1900, Boston. And the reason I take this stuff so serious because a lot of us went through 12 years of school, formal education, public school in these white institutions. And still today, as parents, we forcibly make our children go to these institutions, knowing damn well they're not giving our children our portion of history. And you never got your portion of history. So now at the age of 27, 28, 35, 42, 56, 64, whatever age you guys are listening, now at this ripe old age, you're just now really understanding how important it is to have our history taught, where our curriculum is being pushed. What if our children learn in third grade, fourth grade about the National Negro Business League? What if our children knew that at that same time period they're showing their forefathers in cotton fields, we were actually operating as business owners and we never got lynched, we never were slaves, and we never picked cotton? Why they keep telling us the same part of history? And why do we keep accepting that same part of history? And why are we not questioning that part of history? Why did nobody think to question? Why are they calling it the Indian Removal Act? When every Indian they listed looked like you that got removed. And then 35 years later, they invited you back by name to the land as Negroes. They after they changed it, they then re-invited you back on the land as Negroes, but then only to dupe you again after you don't side up shop, till the soil, got the products ready, you got the farm ready to go. You lift your head up, here go a whole funky wagon of YTs pulling up on your property saying, "Oh, Andrew Johnson never passed that 40 acres. You're on our land, nigga. But we'll let you stay here and work and stay in that old shed for free to give us a portion of your crop." Why aren't they pushing our history like this? So anyway, that's the National Negro Business League, which was founded or led by Booker T. Washington. He's a very interesting character. You should know who he is also. Booker T. Washington actually attended Hampton Indian Institute. It was said he walked from Alabama up to Virginia. That's what they said now. He walked that far. I have driven from Atlanta to Virginia. It's an 8-hour drive. And just sitting in a car going 90 miles an hour on I-20 to 95, I don't like sitting in the car that long. So I couldn't even imagine. They said the brother walked to the Hampton Indian Institute, where he enrolled and graduated from Hampton Indian Institute, better known today as Hampton University. Which Booker T. Coleman, college president, promoted, opening over 600 chapters. It reached every city with significant Black population. How did the National Negro Business League reach every city of significant Black population? So that's like Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Houston, the same significant populations we see now. 600 chapters were opened. This was done without Snapchat. This was done without what you call it, group chat, text message, emails. He did all that without this. He had no followers. He didn't go viral. How did he do this back then? Why were we such a collective back then? And I want you guys to pay attention to the collective, how collective we were back then, and a procession through history. Now we're gonna stop at 1930, but if I were to continue from 1930 to 1980, you would see the dysfunction oozing into the black establishments. You would see the dysfunction oozing into the black homes. You would start to see, wow, we were actually black families back then, like husbands and wives didn't talk about black men wasn't shit, and it never was publicly pushed like that. It was it wasn't very conducive at a time that we were doing so great. And that's what I'm gonna keep saying to you guys. We were doing amazing back then. Amazing. African Americans had operated virtually every kind of company, but some of the most prominent black owned businesses have been insurance companies, including North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company, banks, recording labels, funeral parlors, barbershops, cosmetics, barber salons, beauty salons, sorry, newspapers, restaurants, soul food restaurants, real estate, record stores, and bookstores. And in 1920, there were tens of thousands of black businesses, and the great majority of them quite small black business. The largest were insurance companies. That's what they're saying. Let's go down to a little bit more. Before emancipation, Lunsford Lane, 1803 to 1863. It's a serious looking brother right here. Before emancipation, and we do have the understanding. I want you guys to in the chat put 222. We do understand that emancipation means transfer. Emancipation does not mean free. Do we understand that? Put 222 if we can agree that emancipation does not mean set free. Emancipation means transfer. And if there's anybody confused of why emancipation does not mean freedom or liberation, let me know. But by the collective, 222 should be in the chat. We all understand that emancipation don't mean free. That's not what emancipation means. Emancipation, nobody got liberated on the Emancipation Proclamation. They got transferred. If you're confused about that statement, please say so now. We'll move forward. Be honest. If you're like, wait a minute, what do you mean emancipation doesn't mean freedom? The Emancipation Proclamation, it happened, didn't it? Transfer ownership. Exactly. Okay. Ms. Smith, thank you for being honest. So, Ms. Smith, I'm just gonna take a couple minutes out to explain to Ms. Smith, I would assume. We look at something called um etymology. Etymology. And thank you again for being so transparent, because everybody don't know every damn thing. I don't know every damn thing. Okay. Etymology.
Here's the definition of etymology: the study of the.
And dealing with etymology, or what's known as the etymon, it gives us the origin from which every word derives from. It gives the origin to where words derive from, which, since our people really don't have a grasp of linguistics or the English language, and the English language is an equivocal language. You can say one thing to mean two different things, right? So that's why we say equivocal language. Etymology gives us the source. And according to etymology, the word emancipates means transfer of property. And that's exactly what Abraham Lincoln did. He transferred the possession of property, chattel property, from the plantations over to the state. Lincoln also deemed these individuals who were under servitude in the southern states, Confederate state. He also deemed them. He also, my child, man. He also deemed them contrabands of war. Contrabands of war. So that was from Miss Smith. Look up the etymology of emancipate. It's going to show you transfer, and then go look up, type in, yeah, I'll show you real quick. Lincoln classified slaves as contrabands of war. Slavery declared contrabands of war. Contraband and that property from the emancipation, the word emancipate means the same exact thing. The property. So that's what we're talking about when we say the emancipation does not mean that. Now, before emancipation, Black entrepreneurs can be traced back when Africans were first forcibly brought to North America in the 16th century. We're talking about two groups of people on your paper, because we got to break this spell. And I really believe in breaking spells. You have to write down the spell. Write down two different people. Hold on, y'all. Get out of this kitchen. What is you doing? Go upstairs. Get out the kitchen. And eat that. That's ready to get your corn up. It's herb. My bad. Kids, man, they make you just want to. Apologies, guys. Many African Americans who gained their freedom from slavery opened up their own business. So we wrote down two different people, right? Two different people. Two different people. And I'm not saying this to draw division. There's two different people. One kind of people were actually Africans. And the second kind of people were the indigenous. Start training your mind to understand there was two kinds of people. There were Africans who were enslaved, and there were also some local people who were enslaved. There were also some free Africans, and there were also some free people of color. The free Africans and the free people of color is one group. The enslaved Africans and the enslaved people of color are the second group. So amongst the Black culture, you had a society of Negroes who became the Black aristocrats. Aristocracy is the word I wanted to use. You had a Black aristocracy that began to form in the early 1900s, and that Black aristocracy was the Black wealth. Now, some of these Black aristocrats of that Black wealth, well, a lot of them owned slaves also. That's why one day we have to talk about the Black slave owners and who they really were, and really, really read about them. Not just can throw out a couple of names here and there, because we real good for that shit. We real good for just throwing out one or two names, like we know the whole subject matter. We're gonna go into the whole subject and deal with the matter. That's who they end up becoming. And just like today in 2024, I can only speak for Atlanta or the Georgia area, especially Atlanta. You got some of these Negroes in Atlanta who don't deal with the other Negroes in Atlanta. They don't even go to the neighborhood. They don't even know what they're doing. And remember earlier, I told you the Reconstruction was for social and political. You have a lot of people who live in the hood who are just not politically active. And when they do become politically active, it's seen as a sign of aggression, or like Marxism or something just extreme. You know what I'm saying? These individuals do come out of a political notion. And socially, the Black aristocrats, they socialize different, they dress different, they go to different meetings, they have different galas that people who are not part of the group, they have no idea about. Two different people. Even within the two groups of people, you have different identities under those two groups of people. Many African Americans who gained their freedom from slavery opened their own business, even some enslaved African Americans. Let's read that again. Many African Americans who gained their freedom from slavery opened their own business, and even some enslaved African Americans were able to open business. I'm going to read it one more time so you can see the two groups of people. Many African Americans who gained their freedom from slavery opened up their businesses. One group. And even some enslaved African. Does that sentence make sense? Many African Americans who gained their freedom from slavery opened up their businesses. And even some enslaved Africans who were able to operate their business either as skilled tradesmen or minor tradesmen and peddlers. Enslaved African Americans operated business both with and without their owner's permission. Although those who operate business without the owner's permission risk punishment if caught. Free blacks facing a general hostile environment occasionally operated small business. Profit-making business were created by more free and enslaved African Americans than one might realize. So right here, they're talking about the free blacks or free people of color, and then the enslaved blacks. See right here? Free blacks, and then they go and enslaved Africans. Two groups of people. When the opportunity presented itself, it was taken by these men and women, sometimes timidly, sometimes wholeheartedly, and often endorsed by masters of the enslaved. Business often involved out of skills or specialists in the business owner and service provider already knew it. Examples include tobaccoist, Lunsford Lane. He was a tobaccoist. Recalls selling a basket of peaches for money he could keep, and very soon he'd say plans for money making took principal possession of my thought. It says in the 6 to 8 years he had amassed $1,000, enough to purchase his freedom, as we read in the narrative of Lunsford Lane. So he just hustled and bought himself out of his contract. When we say people purchase their freedom, there's just contracts. Let's say that contract, that labor contract, write down labor contract, put labor contract, put slash bond, labor contract slash bond. When he was able to go his bond or pay his bond or satisfy his labor contract, that's what he did. A lot of people did that. Not a lot, many did it. Shoemaker William J. Brown was born into a free black family. See? Shoemaker was the other kind of Negro, while Lunsford Lane was the first kind. Lunsford Lane was the enslaved black. William J. Brown was the free black. So you have enslaved black people, you have free black people. Two types of black people. I know historically they just lump them together. They give you Harriet Tubman, and they'll give you who else? Martin Luther King, and give you the same people all in once. Never once really go into their background about these two different kinds of people. Indentured was a contract, absolutely. A lot of people were under contract, call it indentured. Peace, Minister. How do I feel? Actually, ask how do I feel? I would assume. How do you feel? How do I feel like this is going to walk us into the time of fraternity starting going through Howard University and construction, what they call Divine Nine? Not today. We're not going to deal with the boule brats and chats and organizations. Not today. I'm gonna give you the black business owners. Divine, that's a whole nother story for itself right there. A great point though. Great fucking point. Great point. Way to pay attention. Sailmaker, James Fortin Sr., a free man and grandfather of Charlotte Fortin, born free. Free man. Why am I pointing out the free man so much? They were never under bondage, which should eliminate these fucking photos in your head. Because him, James Fortin, write down the names if you feel like doing. You don't have to write none of this shit down, first of all. But I would highly advise to write these names down. We got November, December, about 3.5, 4 months before they give you the same Negroes in February again. Well, this February, let's try to post new people. Let's try to enlighten our people to some other people of history, of significance, that were free, who were never slaves. William J. Brown, James Fortin were never out here. They never did this. They never picked cotton. They were not slaves. They could read, they could write, educated, both socially and politically, during the time frame that we're talking about. James Fortin Sr., a free man and grandfather of Charlotte Fortin, freeborn, learned the sail making trade after the Revolution. That's 1700s. Bought his employer's business. He bought his employer's business, not his slaver, not his slave master, his employer, because he was employed. See, the freed blacks were employed. That's why we go and read General Order Number 3, 1866 in Galveston, Texas, which we commonly celebrate as Juneteenth. That's why when you read through that entire paragraph, which I've shown out several times, you will see in that paragraph, they will tell you in the paragraph, the condition between slave and master is no longer that, but it's now employer and employee. We advise the freed Negroes to remain in their homes and continue to work for wages. He bought his employer's business and later became the wealthiest black man in Philadelphia. Who know that he was the wealthiest black man in Philadelphia? In the 1835 article from the white journal Anti-Slave Record, a white reporter described a visit to Fortin's sail-making business. Because now I'm interested in this right here. The Anti-Slavery Record. We got to look this up. Anti-Slavery Report. Ooh, I'll read that later. That's interesting. Barber, after being emancipated by his enslaver in 1820, a lot of our people were emancipated, or what was called meritorious manumission. It says, after being emancipated by his enslaver in 1820, William Johnson became a successful black businessman in Natchez, Mississippi, operating a barbershop, loaning money, and acquiring real estate. He had so much money, he was able to loan it out. His name is William Johnson. William Johnson. Merchants, freeborn in Philadelphia. Melvin Gibbs. Melvin Gibbs became a businessman, lawyer, politician, and abolitionist for several years. He operated a clothing store in San Francisco, which we learned from autobiography Shadow and Light, 1902. After purchasing her freedom in St. Louis, Elizabeth Hobbs Keckles was the American seamstress, activist, writer who lived in Washington, D.C. She was a personal dressmaker and confidant of Mary Todd Lincoln. moved to Washington, D.C., and became a dressmaker for Mary Todd Lincoln. So she made dresses for Abraham Lincoln's wife. She was Abraham Lincoln's wife, personal stylist. Her name is Elizabeth Keckley. Let's talk Reconstruction real quick. Emancipation in civil rights permitted businessmen to operate inside of American legal structure, starting with the Reconstruction era. This is a very important era. This is the era called Black Rule. Write out the word Reconstruction. Write out the word Reconstruction. 1863 to 1877. It's already written down. I'm sorry. That's why I'm taking notes, keeping up with you guys. Beside or underneath or somewhere in the same area of Reconstruction, 1863 to 1877, you're going to write Black Rule. B-L-A-C-K. Rule. Not as a rule, but like rulers. So we're going to reposition your thinking to now understand the Reconstruction time period of America was Black rulership of the South. Let me correct myself. Black rulership of the South. Robert Reed Church, the South's first Black millionaire, and in a photograph for Washington, D.C. based newspaper, The Colored American, 1903. Robert Reed Church, the South's, the down South. Let me get myself out the way. I feel like I'm in the way over here. Real estate mogul, Robert Reed Church, the South's first Black millionaire. It was in a newspaper out of D.C. called The Colored American in 1903. So just alone, I haven't even got to any of the founding fathers yet I want to talk about. I've shown you guys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 Black business owners and millionaires in the same time frame that you guys gave me words like farmers, cotton, antebellum, landowner, landlord, slavery, civil war. What else y'all gave me? Segregation, oppression. Those words y'all gave me earlier about this time frame, I haven't said anything about nobody picking cotton, nobody getting beat, nobody getting chased by dogs, nobody foot getting cut off, nobody being lynched. I ain't said nothing about nothing. And we're talking about the same exact time frame. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Now, to his point, it was a short rule, but we should be inspired by the fact that during the worst time of America, we were taught the worst time of America, we was doing some amazing shit. That's the whole point of the matter. But yeah, you're right. It wasn't very long. Rule mean lines across something. Rule, right. Okay. All right. I'll take that. All right, everybody. We're about an hour into the show right now. And of course, as always, I have to do my due diligence and impress upon you guys when you get an opportunity to definitely go over to TikTok. Follow me on TikTok. I'm at the 4,000 marker on TikTok right now. I'm trying to get to 5K. My goal is to hit 10,000 by the end of the year, man. With y'all help, I know I can do that. Follow me on TikTok at the Minister of Information over on TikTok. Please, if you have not done that, go do that immediately. And also, you guys know I got the website Jumping Like Jordan right now. The hoodies are flying off the shelf right now. Get your hoodie before they sell out. Various different colors. One says Living Legacy. I'm sorry, Urban Legacy. The Minister of Info. That's my crown, my crest, my emblem, and then the Creator Mind logo is in there as well. My other creation, God Vibes. This hoodie comes in a lot of different colors too. Blue, green, red, pink. I'm in the works of recreating this look with, of course, a melanated Jesus, but just for shits and giggles, I actually ordered 2 of these because I just like the conversation piece around it. When people see it, And then of course for you ladies, I got an Impossible Think Clearly shirt, all about meditation, parts of minds, you know what I'm saying? So definitely hit the site. If you don't know what the site is, give me a shout. And my email. Where's my email at? There we go. Shoot me an email right there. The MOI podcast gmail.com. I'll send you the entire link. I'll send you a couple links actually. It's a couple people I owe some information to. I got your email. I promise you I'll send over those pieces and those points. Thanks for the Cash App, guys. I see it dropping right now. Thanks for I appreciate you guys so much. Now the deal was this now. Go see what it is. It better not be Gianna outside. The deal was this, y'all. If I'm able to convince you that in the 1800s that we were doing more than what you thought we were doing, because at the end of this PowerPoint, I'm gonna ask you guys to give me some more words to replace those negative words you guys gave me earlier. Okay. Let's go. So I gave you about 7 people already. Reconstruction, 63. Sorry, 1863 to 77. Out beside that, out beside Reconstruction, put Black Rule of the South. Black Rule of the South. By the 1890s, thousands of small business operations had opened in urban areas. From the late 1880s, there was a remarkable development of Negro businesses, banks and insurance companies, undertakings and retail stores. It occurred at the time when Negro barbers, tailors, caterers, tradesmen, blacksmiths, and other artisans were losing their white customers, depending upon the Negro market. The promoters of new enterprise naturally upheld the spirit of the racial self-help and solidarity. Now, out of this movement, this was an entire movement. Sorry, this was an entire movement. The ideology of Negroes picking themselves up by their bootstraps, not blaming the white man, not blaming nobody. Apologies. Not blaming nobody, picking themselves up by their bootstraps, doing what the F they got to do, and getting it done. This ideology began to permeate through the time periods throughout the early 1900s, late 1800s. This ideology of Negroes doing for self, not asking for loans, not asking for anything. This came at that time period. Okay. People like what's his name? He came from Jamaica. Marcus Garvey. People like Marcus Garvey begin to embody this ideology, picking yourself up by your bootstraps, doing what we got to do, pick your head up. Hey, let's go. Timothy Drew with the Moore Science Temple later in the 1920s in Chicago. Tell it, hey, we got work. Let's go. This heightened sense of who we were as a people. Now, even though they show us pictures like the cotton fields, coming off the heels of this right here, such greatness began to amass and build in American society. Hell, I just gave y'all 7 people in that same time frame. They're in of and about same time frame, and that's why. Let me show you what it said before emancipation. This happens before 1865. Before Negroes were set free, this was happening. Before. Why aren't they teaching us this shit? Why aren't they showing us that really Reconstruction was just the time of Black rule in the South? Why would they give it such a perverted term of Reconstruction? Oh, they was building skyscrapers. They weren't building nothing. They were rebuilding the social and political climate of the South. They being white liberals from the Union, coming to collaborate and protect free Black thought of the South, putting them in positions such as senators, congressmen. They're formulating their own body of politics to run the South. The fear came out of when these palm-colored people, white people, thought that Negroes were going to do them the same way that they've been doing them, and they felt like white people, of course, felt like they were losing America. They were losing what their founding fathers had put in place for them. They were losing themselves. Let's just pretend for a second, 1890. 1830, the Indian Removal Act just happened in 1830, same time period. What's that, 60 years later? Anybody that was born during that time period was only 60 years old by 1890. I'm trying to put it in perspective so you guys can see how close in proximity these events happen in history. And the Indian Removal Act didn't happen some 400 years ago, and then later you get people like W.E.B. Du Bois. No, it really happened a generation or two away from W.E.B. Du Bois. It really happened about a generation or two away from people like Dr. King. Like, this shit was really, really recent time period. We ain't got to go back to the Moors. We ain't got to go back to Columbus, or we can go just about 135 years ago. We can go relatively recent in history. And that's why I will continue to teach about the 1800s. I will continue to teach about the antebellum and the Reconstruction era of the South, because this is an important era in history that I think our people, we just breeze over this shit. We think it's convoluted with too much, what y'all said, too much slavery, too much farming, too much cotton, antebellum, segregation, oppression. We just don't deal with that time period historically as a collective, as individuals. I know you guys are smarter than that. But I want you guys to see, even at the worst period of history, how great and brilliant we were doing as a collective. And if we could somehow usher our minds into thinking that same way again, 1890 won't be nothing compared to 2024. They already told us we're the highest grossing people in America. Like, we spend the most, which means we make the most. Some type of way we're able to get our hands on this capital. If they're able to track how much we spend, somebody's tracking how much we're getting as a collective. So don't make this conversation subjective to where it's, oh, well, I'm doing right. You may be doing well. You may be a millionaire yourself. Anybody on this live chat could be well on their way to being a millionaire, but we're not talking about just you. We're talking about the collective as a people, as a collective body of people here in North America. Who all should share the common interest of uplifting fallen humanity, uplifting each other. Let's read on. Memphis, Tennessee was the base for Robert Reed Church, a freedman. And they'll let you know who the free people were, who the enslaved people were all the time too. A freedman who became the South's first black millionaire. He made his wealth from speculation in the city, in city real estate. Much of it, after Memphis became depopulated after the yellow fever epidemic, he found the city's first black-owned bank. Solvent Savings Bank and Trust was an African-American owned bank in Memphis, Tennessee, founded in 1906 by Robert Reed Church. It was the first African-American. He was the first African-American only bank to achieve $1 million in assets. It merged with Fraternal Savings Banks and Trust in 1927, which failed in 1920. That's always the story. Just like with the Freedmen's Bank. Now, historically, they say it was the first African-American owned bank to achieve $1 million in assets. When we can go right here and put up Freedmen's Bank.
According to Wikipedia, the Freedmen's Bank Building, previously known as the Treasury Annex, is a historic office building located on the corner of Madison Street and Pennsylvania Avenue NW in Washington, D.C.
The Freedmen's Bank To support land grants and other elements, Freedmen's Bank Bureau Act. A Freedmen's Bank was established March 3rd, 1865, to help newly freed African Americans navigate their financial lives. And of course, they put the good brother Frederick Douglass to run it after they ran it down. The Freedmen's Bank failed in 1874. They had $57 million back then. That's like quadruple what it could be right now in money. You imagine how many black families would have got loans and got approved on business ventures, had that 57 million in the Freedmen's Bank, plus the 1 million in assets in Memphis Bank by Mr. Reed. Those are two black-owned banks at a time frame that you guys said that it was oppressive, it was segregation, it was farmers, it was cotton, it was all those negative, slanderous things you thought about your people in this time frame, because it's all you've been told. We've been owning banks with 57 million, over $1 million in asset banks, not just. And see, the way it's taught is if Tulsa, Oklahoma was the only spot to have this information going on. This was black rule. You're never going to see a time period in history rather than this time period that black people were really running a fucking America. Not running the government now, but running our side of the table. Now, did we have knuckleheads and people wasn't doing their part? Of course, that's always going to be a part of every society when it comes to us. We're going to have people not doing their part, people hating, talking crap, blah, 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 blah. But look at what was happening. Robert Reed Church. This brother had so much money in assets that he opened a bank. Y'all didn't know that. I don't care. Y'all did not know that. Did none of y'all know that? Y'all did not know that. Black communities were undoubtedly negatively affected and enforced by racial segregation. Here's what I'm going to say to y'all. Segregation had no effect. It was integration that had the effect. Segregation, because we were segregated, that's why we was able to open our own banks. Because we were segregated, that's why we was able to open our own stores. Because we were segregated, that was the mechanism that allowed us to do so great for ourselves, because we were segregated. We didn't need to go to their restaurants and we had our own movie theaters. These are the images y'all need to be seeing. These are the images that should be throughout your households. These are the images your children should be seeing. Look, they're in our store. This is our store. This is a black-owned business. They're shopping in our stores. Integration became the undoing of black business. Integration, not segregation. Leave us alone anyway. We're fine. We got our own grocery stores. We got our own movie theaters. We got our own schools. We don't even need to be over there with y'all. That was an idea that was planted. That idea was planted. They got the better books. They got the better. As a collective, black people were not fighting to go eat at no white people's diners. They can't cook no way. Why do we want to leave our seasoned food to go fight to sit at the counters and their diners? Our grocery stores got the curry and the jerk seasoning and the Texas Pete hot sauce. Our grocery stores do. Their grocery stores don't have that. Why are we fighting? Integration was the undoing of black business, black America in this time period. We had it going on. We got it going on. That's why Dr. King had to apologize for integrating us into a burning house. We don't need to be in y'all restaurants eating y'all unseasoned food. We got our own bus lines, our own airports, we got our own neighborhoods, we got our own communities. The idea of equality came out of what? Social reform. social reformation. Let me ask you a question. Who made white people the line for equality? What made them the margin? Like what made, who decided that they would be the marker for equitable? Who decided that they had better stuff than we did? Who was the person going into their shit, comes to our shit, looking at their shit, looking at our shit, say, oh, you know, white people, they got better carpet in their schools. And their books look new too. Their books look new. Who cared? Like, what was the curriculum at these all black institutions? Huh? How were these men right here who look like very hard workers, how were these individual fathers able to support their whole household? And they had 10, 12, 9, 8, 10 kids back then. Like, it wasn't no just one child. If you had just one child back then, they thought something was wrong with you. They would laugh you off the block if you only had one child. Like, it was a custom for us to have more than one child because, and moms, black women, physically have to go to work. They might have nannied or washed clothes or whatever the case is, but most black women didn't have to work at all because daddy gonna hold it down. The black fathers held it down. Now, these are black fathers with no master's degrees, no doctoral degrees. Okay, they ain't got no Bentleys, they ain't got no Ferraris, they ain't got none of that stuff back then. Okay, hardworking black men were able to put food on the table and provide nice ass houses too, nice homes. Black families were essential in this time period. Essential in this time period. Black neighborhood. Let's split it up real quick. Black neighborhoods of the 1920s. Entire communities of just us. Integration. Integrating with those white folks is what ruined our capital. We were in the inner cities. They were out in the rural areas. They decided to move back into the inner city, urban areas, and push us out to the rural areas. So things like redlining would be applied to where they had to create zoning to make sure that these white neighborhoods had equitable land assets that was equal to these urban neighborhoods, and they would purposely not give the same financial attention to these urban neighborhoods that they did to the rural areas on purpose. That's where redlining and red zoning, all that shit came from. To reposition the properties. We had ran the property value up. It wasn't no goddamn Dorito bags on the ground, no black and mild paper, lottery tickets all over the ground. No, clean neighborhoods, and you were clean. And you had on clothes. You would have on clothes, dressed to the nines. How did they get us out of the cities? Various race riots. Chicago race riot, the New York race riot, the New York draft riot of 63, the riots in Philly and Baltimore, rioting, desecrating the property where we live. That's how we got put out those communities also. So no, segregation. We were able to thrive in segregation. Integration is the thing that ruined our people. Integration ruined us. Now, let's go talk about our first individual founding father. Let's go to New York. You guys have heard me mention this before. But today we're going to talk about a little bit more because once again, I believe in repetitive repetitive teaching, the same way you hear a song on the radio 15 times before you make it to your destination. And by 2 weeks later, you're humming that beat and you're like, why am I singing that song? Repetitiveness. Repetitive, over and over. And eventually the light bulb comes on. Talking about Weeksville. Anybody from New York? Anybody from New York? If you're from New York, you may want to pull a little bit closer to the screen. We're talking about New York. Now, remember earlier, I asked the question, would it really matter if it was a up north or down south? Does it really matter where we were in this time frame? Somebody said, yeah, because according to certain laws, it would definitely matter where you were. Well, the only law, one of the only laws that was really prominent between the North and the South, something called the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act was very prominent between both northern states and southern states and the unsettled West, because a lot of Negroes tried to go out there too during the Great Compromise of 1850, right? Dred Scott being the first person to understand, to get put in this place, like, hey, look, let me tell you something. No, take your ass back where you at. You ain't free nowhere. And he tried to go to court for it. Now, have Negroes gone to court and won cases in that time frame and the time frame prior, like 1600s? You have people of color going to court, winning court cases. John Hanson had to go to court. John Hanson won. The sister we covered yesterday, can't call her name right now, she went to court. Several people went to court in 1600s, 1700s of color and won their cases. Some cases were overturned. It's fair to say legislatively, well, not legislatively, but judicially, we were losing. 3 forms of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Judicially, we were losing. Laws were being created, put on the books. Acts, codes, ordinances were put on the books against people of color politically. One in particular, write this down real quick: 1829, the Anti-Literacy Act. Anti-literacy laws were put into place. Now, this is not like the Christian codes. The Christian black codes were local municipal ordinances limited to certain states. Okay. Anti-literacy laws was across the whole goddamn situation. It applied to everybody. Anti-literacy laws in many slave states before and during the Civil War affected slaves, freedmen, and in some cases, all people of color. Those are the Indians. If you guys didn't catch that, that's everybody. That's the Negroes, that's the Africans, and the Indians. Excuse me. The Negroes, the black people, and the Indians, all people of color. In this particular time period, everybody of color was considered to be colored folks. Don't matter what tribe you rep, what tribe you claim, you colored. And we all know the different circumstances surrounding that misnomer. Some laws arose from concern that literate slaves could forge the document required to escape to a free state. According to William M. Bank, many slaves who learned to write did indeed achieve freedom by this method. Simply because they couldn't read and write, they were in bondage. One of the reasons the anti-literacy laws were pushed by YT people, because they feared that Negroes would learn how to read and forge documents required to escape to free states. The only reason that they were so afraid of you reading and writing, because you could now understand the power of your signature. And you were no longer illiterate. You were no longer dyslexic. And that's so important, because even now in 2024, when they put contracts in front of us, whether it's record labels, whether it's movie deals, whether it's a goddamn piece of property or real estate, we don't read that shit. We don't read it. I'm just gonna say we as a people collectively, and if you read it, good on you. We hardly read the instruction to put our kids' toys together during Christmas. We don't even read the instruction. We look at the box and just emulate the picture on the box, and we put it together best we know how. We do not read. This has been a long time standing notion in the Black community that Black people don't read, or Black people hate to read. But the other side of anti-literacy laws, the other side of them being concerned of you learning how to sign your contract and get out of your contracts, according to what this just said, they were afraid some laws arose from concerns that literate slaves could forge documents, which is the contracts, required to escape to a free state. The other part of it was, if you could read and write, you now could vote. Now, there were already Negroes already voting Republican before this notion of literacy laws came to the polls. But now you had a whole other group of people, of Black people, who were encroaching freedom. And if all of them, let's just say it was 1,000 Negroes, and out of 1,000, only 450 could read and write, which means only 450 could vote. But now the other, 575, 556, whatever the difference is, ratio is, now they know how to read and write. Now all 1,000 can vote. Oh, no. So anti-literacy laws had to be put in place to go against insurrections, to stop Negroes from signing their signatures on the contract, and most importantly, to get their ass away from that voting poll. Don't let them Negroes vote. They listen, voting in politics became the centrifuge for white folks in the late 1800s to the 1960s because of the fact you was ruling the South. I'm going to show you, man. It's called the prostrate states. We're going to go to an actual document from South Carolina. We're going to read through that document. We're not going to go off of Wiki. Wiki is cool when you're trying to make points, but we can go to the actual document. We're going to read the document. And there's other documents in Mississippi as well. But anti-literacy laws. Why did they have anti-literacy laws? They was afraid of you forging documents for freedom. Also, slave insurrections. Anti-literacy laws also arose from the fear of slave insurrections, particularly around the time of abolitionist David Walker's 1829 of appeal to the colored citizens of the world, which openly advocated rebellion, and Nat Turner's Rebellion of 1831. Isn't it quite a coinky dinky that 1831 Nat Turner Rebellion starts the same year the Indian Removal Act starts? Nat Turner insurrection was his last stronghold of the Indian War. That was it. We gonna go out on our feet. We gonna go out on our knees. They call it a rebellion. It wasn't a rebellion. It was the last part of the Indian War. Nat Turner was captured. Chief Nat was captured, tortured, and killed. Indian Removal Act. Get him off the land. 1830, 1831. I'm going to tell y'all again. If you study the history of North America, southeastern region between 1829 and 1930, if you take that one chunk of history and you begin to digest every part of that history and start to draw the dots, Nat Turner Rebellion 1831, your mind should automatically say, that's also the time of the Indian Removal Act. That's also about 34 years before they asked us to return back to the land. All this should start firing around the same time for you guys. The United States is the only country known for having anti-literacy laws. The United States is the only country in this world known for having anti-literacy laws. Two of the reasons: fear of rebellion, fear of freedom. The third one is fear of voting. Why were there anti-literacy laws? I'm going to ask that question randomly one day, and y'all better fucking know it, because you should write it down. Don't just sit here and look at me talk and listen to me. It's not entertainment. It's just, you're in class right now. Please take notes. The reason for the anti-literacy laws: fear of freedom fear of rebellion, fear of voting, fear of freedom, fear of rebellion, and fear of voting. Those are the top 3 reasons for the anti-literacy laws. Top 1829 anti-literacy laws. Anti-literacy Act 1829 to 1867. What was the primary reasons for the anti-literacy laws? Ooh, I know. Fear of freedom, right? Fear of all the shit, fear of freedom, for real. They was afraid the Negroes were going to get free by signing themselves over. They were afraid of insurrections and voting. Those are the top reasons. Let's move on. (1740 to 1834), Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North and South Carolina, and Virginia all passed anti-literacy laws. I wonder why. See, every time I talk to y'all, we're always talking about the southeast region of America. We're always talking about that area. Hold on, y'all. Sorry, I got a text. South Carolina passed the first law which prohibited teaching slaves to read and write, punishable by a fine of 100 pounds and 6 months in prison. Via an amendment, it's called the 1739 Negro Act. Might want to write that down. 1739 Negro Act. And the 1739 Negro Act came on the heels of things, of course, as insurrections and slaves kept running their way, or enslaved people kept running their way. They later coined the term drapetomania. Some slave owners blame abolitionists for the supposed need for anti-literacy laws. For example, South Carolina, James H. Hammond. That's his face. We got to start putting names with faces together so you can see what these YT palm colored people look like. This is very important. He was a state representative from 1835 to 1836, the 60th governor of South Carolina from 1842 to 1844, a United States senator from 1857 to 1860. He was an enslaver. James Henry Hammond was an enslaver. He was U.S. senator from 57 to 60. He was the governor of South Carolina, 1842 to 44. He was a state representative from 35 to 36 of South Carolina. Please burn that in your head. We're talking about South Carolina. We're going to go talk about South Carolina in a second to show you who really was in charge in a minute. An ordained pro-slavery ideology wrote in a letter written in 1845 to the British abolitionist Thomas Clarkson. I can tell you, it was the abolitionist agitation. If the slave is not allowed to read his Bible, the sins rest upon the abolitionists, for they stand prepared to furnish him with a key to it, which would make it not a book of hope and love and peace, but of despair, hatred, and blood, which would convert the reader not into a Christian, but into a demon. Allow our slaves to read your writing, stimulating them to cut their throats. Can you believe us to be such unspeakable fools? So he basically saying, if these niggas learn how to read, the Bible is no longer gonna be a book of hope. It's gonna be a book of slaughter. They're gonna fuck us up if they learn how to read. If they really find out who they are in this book. That was his fear. If they find out who they are or were as a collective. Let's go on. Significant anti-black laws included 1829 Georgia prohibiting prohibiting teaching blacks to read, punishable by fine and imprisonment. 1830, Louisiana, North Carolina passes laws punishing anyone teaching Negroes to read with a fine and imprisonment. 1832, Alabama and Virginia. 1833, Georgia again. Prohibited blacks from working in reading or writing jobs via employment law, and prohibited teaching blacks, punished by fines and whippings via anti-literacy laws. So they had employment laws that Negroes could even work in a condition that you could read or write. 1847, Missouri prohibited assembling or teaching slaves to read and write. Now, keep in mind, 1830s with these prohibiting laws, this is before the Christian black codes. Christian black codes ain't this ain't gonna do Christian black codes. This was on top of the Christian black codes. This is how much political reconstruction that the Europeans were trying to do in the South. This is political reconstruction and sorts of social reconstruction. Integration, segregation, or social remedies. And they became political remedies. We're not going to be able to escape the social political aspect of this time period. The social and political degradation of so-called Negroes in this time period. It won't go away. Hopefully I get a chance to expose some of it. The 19th century, Virginia law specified every assemblage of Negroes for the purpose of instruction in reading or writing or in the nighttime for any purpose shall be unlawfully assembled. Any justice may issue a warrant in any office or person requiring him to enter any place where such assemblage may be and seize the Negroes therein. And he or other justices may order such Negroes to be punished with stripes. That means getting your ass whipped. In the 1800s, Virginia passed a law specifically saying Negroes are not allowed to assemble reading or writing. That's schools, that's parochial schools, that's private schools, there's charter schools. Under the threat of being whipped, you could not even get together to share notes about, hey, what you get on answer. We can't talk. Okay, we can't even read. Damn. Okay. This is the Reconstruction. This is the history that they try to push on you, that you couldn't read back then, you couldn't write back then. I'm about to blow your mind. I'm about to show you we was reading. Not only we reading and writing, we're running businesses and operating banks. What type of literacy did they have? Was it just the free Negroes running around with this information? Like, did everybody have the information? Like, what the fuck was going on? 2024, the literacy rate of so-called black people are not good. Even with myself obtaining the bachelor's degrees in business, and many of you on the chat, I'm pretty sure are graduates of scholastics and scholars of schools and certificates and programs. Even with all the education that we collectively have right now in this chat, there's still people right now today that can't read, they can't write, they're in and out of jail, which by article the 14th Amendment, 13th Amendment makes them a slave. So yes, back then there were destitute people who could not read or write, and there were people who were educated, who were doing well, running businesses, entrepreneurship. It's the same shit show. It's the same dog and pony show. Y'all just look at history as, oh, that was a long time ago. It's the same things are happening because socially and politically, the same thing is happening right now in the black community. This is why the Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught that according to science, black means death. Which science, Prophet? Social science and political science. Even right now, we don't with the elections coming up, and I don't know, a couple weeks or days, whatever the case is. Politically, we're just divided as a people. We're thinking half of us are Democrats, half of us are Republicans. Says who? We ain't got to be doing that shit. We don't have to be in. We could have our own independent party, and that's what the Black Panther Party was. It was an independent party. It wasn't just a group of Negroes wearing leather coats with shotguns. It was an actual political party. It was a political reformation. Any type of political reformation that we try to start for ourselves is quickly put down. North Carolina black people who disobeyed the law were sentenced to whipping, while whites received fines and jail time. AME Bishop William Henry Hurd remembered from his enslaved childhood in Georgia that any slave caught writing suffered the penalty of having his forefinger cut right from his hand. Other former enslaved people had similar memories of disfigurement and several punishments for reading and writing. For reading and writing, they treated them like they was in the Congo and amputated their fingers if they learned how to read and write. Just for holding a pen in your little black fingers, you would get them chopped off. Because it wasn't even the fact that they was cutting fingers off. It was they knew the power of your signature. And the moment you signed that freedom paper or that contract, you had to be released. That was just the blunt of it. The minute you could sign your name, you could now go to the voting polls. So it wasn't that you couldn't read and write. They didn't want you learning how to read and write. You could learn whatever you wanted to learn. You were the teachers of civilization. What they talking about? Let's go to New York now. New York, 1838. That's right. We so fucking fabulous. We ain't even got to the Civil War yet, and we doing great things in America. We doing great things in America pre-Civil War, because that's what's the time we rule. We rule this shit, bro. I'm gonna show you how we rule this shit. It's called Black Rule. Start talking like this. I dare y'all. Start to, nigga, 18, nigga, we ran America 1800. Next time you at the barbershop, hair salon, wherever you at, Facebook group page, wherever y'all on, nigga, we ran the South in the 1800s. I guarantee you, if you start that conversation about we ran the South in the 1800s, you're gonna have everybody, man, we slaves and picking cotton, and they're gonna say the same things y'all say in the beginning of this live. Farmers, cottons, landlord, oppression, segregation. Y'all gonna hear them same words told to y'all out loud from our people. When you sit, you're gonna start saying in the 1800s, black folks ran the South. And we're gonna use the word black as colloquial. Negroes ran the South in the 1800s. You can get a crazy look. They're gonna look at you like, what you mean we ran the South? And then you begin to progressively show them and tell them all of these beautiful things that was happening in the 1800s with your people. We had banks and everything. During and before slavery, chattel slavery, Civil War. And the Reconstruction era, you're not going to say Reconstruction era. When you hear the word Reconstruction period of the South, you're going to say what? Black rule. See, we ain't got to go to Europe. You know, black folks, let me pull it up. I'm only laughing because I think it's funny. Negroes rule Europe. Now, we can believe this. For whatever reason, I'm about to fuck y'all up with this. We can believe this right here. This we can believe. This we can believe. We can run around here talking about the Moors. You know, we used to rule Europe. Negroes used to rule. Moors, you get so excited about a group of people who are not even from here. This is the psychoneurosis. The psychoneurosis. Why are you getting so excited about foreigners running some foreign shit? Who cares that these North African Berbers, who were commonly referred to as Moors, were able to go into places like Spain, Mauritania, and Algiers and all those areas and do some really cool shit. Like, they really civilized. I'm taking time to breathe because as I'm talking, my mind is firing on all senses. Even with the story of the Moors going into Europe to rule Europe, which a lot of our people really believe that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just giving you how they believe it. Like they have bought into that notion. And this is what 711 to 1492. 700 plus years we were able to hold down an entire fucking continent. But you won't believe. You don't want to believe in your mind that we did the same thing here. Even after everything that was being done to us, we were able to do the same thing here. When you say that black people ruled the South in the 1800s, why is that so far-fetched from you? Why is that so far-fetched? Because they have polluted your mind with niggas in the cotton field. That's why I gave you a lecture. Get out of your cotton picking mind. Get out of that thinking. Stop thinking that way. And I know it's hard because it's been 35, 40, 50, 60 years that we've been taught that we was in cotton fields in the 1800s. I know it was. If I take you back to 711 and 1300s, you definitely believe that these Negroes they ruled. These Negroes ruled over there back then. But when it comes to talking about something over here, your black ass so disconnected, you don't even think we can rule over here. After that happened, what do you think? You get one rule and that's it? That's y'all thought. We had one time to rule it and it's over with now. There ain't no more ruling nothing. That's it. That damn right, Amy. That's it. Point blank, period. That too. For damn sure. In fact, they were the runaways first. They were the runaways. They kept running away. They kept running away. Weeksville, named after James Week, an African-American stevedore. If you don't know what a stevedore is like a merchant seaman. They dock workers, the same jokers who tried to boycott 2 weeks ago. He was a dock worker. He was a black African-American Negro dock worker in 1838. Regular job. Going to work, coming home, paying the bills. 1838, yes, niggas was down south picking cotton on cotton farms. Not him, though. He was in New York working like a regular job. James Weeks, write him down, from Virginia, 1838, 11 years after the abolishment of slavery in New York State. So New York abolished slavery in 1849. See, each state abolished slavery differently. I don't know why we get so excited about 1865, Lincoln Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery was being abolished radically throughout the northern states because the northern states had no real need for slave labor. They needed manufacturing cheap labor, but they didn't necessarily just need free labor. Did they benefit from it? Damn right they did. Everybody benefited from free slave labor. There's no quorum about that. Weeks bought a plot of land from Henry C. Thompson. Henry C. Thompson was a free African-American and land investor. Henry C. Thompson, another free person of color and landowner in the 1830s. Why don't we learn about Henry C. Thompson? Maybe if we learn more about Henry C. Thompson, we'd be more inclined to purchase land. We don't, as a whole, we don't know black landowners. In the comments right now, put 333 if you know black landowner. Don't put now. Wait a minute. Don't put 333. Not somebody you heard got land. Somebody you might know. Somebody you can call right now who's a landowner. I know 3 people right now they bought dirt. They're landowners. A lot of put 333 in the comments if you personally know landowners. The chat should light up with everybody. And it's okay if you don't know landowners. Why don't we know about Henry C. Thompson? I bet you if Henry C. Thompson was being taught to the younger generation, the young black generation, and they had to study Henry C. Thompson. He was an investor in the Ninth Ward of Central Brooklyn. Thompson had acquired the land from Edward Copeland, a political-minded European American and Brooklyn grocer, in 1835. So Henry C. Thompson bought the land in 1835. Mr. Weeks is going to come a little bit later in the story. Previously, Copeland bought land from the heir of John Lefter. John Lefter was a member of the 13th United States Congress as a Democrat Republican representative from New York. He was also a delegate of the New York State Constitutional Convention in 1821 and a member of New York State Senate from 1820 to 1825. He died in Brooklyn. John Lefter was the original owner who sold it to Edward Copeland. Edward Copeland then sold the land to Henry C. Thompson, and Henry C. Thompson turned around and sold it to Mr. James Weeks. There were ample opportunities for land acquisition during this time, as many prominent landholding families sold off their properties during the intense era of land speculation. Many African Americans saw land acquisition as their opportunity to gain economic and political freedom by building their own communities, not integrating with white people 30 years later. The intentions were never for us to integrate with them, but they saw it as an opportunity to gain economic and political freedom. So right under social and political, put economical or economic. So we should have social, political, economical. Social, political, economical. Those are the three things in the 1820s or 1800s that Negroes definitely were after. Nobody said nothing about integrating or fair treatment. No, listen, we don't, just leave us alone. How about that? How about we just do our own thing? Y'all do your own thing. The problem was they saw the prominent rise of black economics. Like, they're outdoing white people. (1835). Watch this. When did World War I start?
According to Library of Congress,
So
July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, beginning World War I.
1917, America joins World War I. 1917, and excuse my language, 1917, your black ass was not allowed to be in the military. You wasn't even a part of the scenario. As a collective, you weren't allowed to get in there. Now, World War I, piece of paper, you better turn your page by now. World War I, you're going to put 1914 to 1918. Okay? That's going to be the First World War. Watch this. What was that shit called? What year was the Great Depression in America?
According to Wikipedia,
1829.
The Great Depression began
1829. Right, Great Depression. What was that? I'm sorry. 1929. I apologize. 1929. 1929. Right, Great Depression. The Great Depression adversely only affected white people. That's why when you put Great Depression in this Google search, the imagery, you're not gonna see us pop up. This is back when they were eating cabbage water and shit. When they were standing in lines. YT people. So World War I, 1918 to 1929, what's that? 11 years. Within 11-year period, white America goes from war-ridden to jobless, homeless. This is the 1920s. I'm gonna go back to Mr. Weeksville. I just want to show you the conditions between white folks and black folks at this time period. What year was Ellis Island immigration? 1892. 1892, 1929, 1914. So from 1892 to 1929, these people, unskilled laborers, flood the shores of America. Unskilled laborers, uneducated. So you really couldn't tell these people coming over here in the 20s from these people right here. The economy never got better for them in this time period. So from World War I, all those YT veterans going over to fight for World War I, a lot of them never returned. The ones who did return never got treated for PTSD, shell shock syndrome, and other crazy things they saw. And this is World War I. 1914. Their grandfathers just got finished fighting in 1865. That's not too much longer than 1914. That's not that far. What's that, 60 something years maybe? The grandsons of the grandfathers from the Civil War were now going into World War I to fight. These are YT people. 1865 to 1776 is a little bit of a stretch, but those descendants fought in the Revolutionary War. These mofos been fighting the entire time they came on these shores. At this time in history, 1914 to 1920, what was the golden era for Negroes in America? Between the end of World War I and the mid 1930s, they produced one of the most significant eras of cultures expressed in the nation's history, called the Harlem Renaissance. Yet this cultural explosion also occurred in Cleveland, Los Angeles, and many cities shaped by the Great Migration. The Great Migration of 1930s is Negroes moving out of the South, by the way. They were, the last ones was 1960s. So even though you have YT people going through what they was going through, this is the great era of excellence for Negroes. This is the birth of what's called race music, which eventually gets you R&B and hip hop. This is the era that the great forefathers and great foremothers of hip hop, R&B, jazz, that shit came out of this era of Negroes when the YT people were at their worst. At their worst. That's why I told you black rule. They had to regain social, political, and economic control of America, but at the time they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. Adversely, economically, there were more poor white people in America at this time than it was you. $18.29. That's why you don't see a picture of you up there. Great Depression fucked them up. real bad. And this is coming off the heels of World War I. So a lot of the fathers and grandfathers never came back from World War I, which created a lot of single parent household for white women in the 1920s. Which, watch this. What is the history of welfare?
According to Federal Safety Net, it started in the 1930s with the Great Depression. 3 small programs were mixed into Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal programs. Still, welfare remained small until the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s.
It started in the 1930s with the Great Depression. 3 small programs were mixed into Franklin D. Roosevelt, the New Deal. This is for impoverished YT people. They needed the welfare system. You didn't need welfare. Now in the 60s, that's when Lyndon Baines Johnson came and duped our ass politically. That's when we got they needed the welfare. Welfare was never created for you. It was to help them. Poor whites who were doing horrible. This is your golden age, remember? Welfare was being started for them, for their children. Don't think about programs like WIC. WIC came in the 60s by the Black Panther Party. Women, infants, and children. That was our program in the 60s by the Black Panther Party. Shouts out to California, and the Black Panther Party. The welfare program started from them. They needed the assistance. They were poor, not you. This is why it's important. I was showing you earlier, coming out of the late 1800s, you was running shit. The First World War, you were not even invited to the First War. You wasn't allowed in the First World War. When were African Americans allowed to join the military?
January 1st, 1863. According to Army.mil, after President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, Black soldiers were officially allowed to participate in the war.
1863. This was under the auspice of you being set free. You come fight for the Union, we'll let you free, right? When were Black men allowed to join the U.S. Navy?
According to Naval History and Heritage Command, Navy.mil, the 3rd of March 1813, reversal of race ban. The Navy officially reversed the August 1798 ban on African American sailors in the fleet, allowing for persons of color to serve on public vessels of the United States.
What was the 1863 race riot? That's not it. 1863 race draft riot.
According to Wikipedia,
I'm fast forwarding to 63 for the Civil War. Then I'm gonna go down to World War I, World War II. Finally, they had desegregated installations for Negroes. You guys know about Tuskegee Airmen, right? You guys know they weren't allowed to be in the same company as white folk. World War I, it was even worse. The point I'm making is, as it pertained to people of color, we were not sent to World War I in droves like young white men were. In fact, in 63, these white immigrants pushed back on the idea. I'm gonna read this right here and then go back to Weeksville because this takes place in the same time frame. You see this? New York draft riots, 1863. $18.50, Weeksville. And watch how I run, where it go? Watch how I run the draft riots right under the New York district of Weeksville. Watch this. In fact, we're going to read through this. They're going to burn down the orphanage school that was located in Weeksville. The New York City draft riots, July 13, 1863, sometimes referred to as the Manhattan draft riots, and known at the time as the Draft Week, were violent disturbances in Lower Manhattan, widely regarded as cumulative accumulation of working class disconnected with new laws passed by Congress that year to draft men to fight on the ongoing Civil War. The riots remain the largest civil urban disturbance in American history. According to Toby Joyce, the riot represented a civil war within the city's Irish community, the Fighting Irish, in that mostly Irish American rioters confronted police while soldiers and pro-war politicians were also the considerable extent from a local Irish immigration community. President Lincoln diverted several regiments of militias and volunteer troops after the Battle of Gettysburg to control the city. The protests turned into a race riot against African Americans by Irish rioters. The official death toll listed was 119 or 120 individuals. Conditions in the city were such the Major General John E. Wool, commander of the Department of the East, said on July 16th that martial law ought to be proclaimed, but I have not significant force to enforce it. The military did not reach the city until the second day of the rioting, by which time the mobs had ransacked and destroyed numerous public buildings, two Protestant church, the homes of various abolitionists and sympathizers, many black homes, and colored orphan asylum on the 44th Street and 5th Avenue was burned to the ground. The area's demographic changed as a result of the riot. Many black residents left Manhattan permanently, with many moving to Brooklyn. By 1865, the black population had fallen below 11,000 for the first time since 1820. The first time since 1820, the population of Negroes in Manhattan had fallen below 11,000. By 1865, they had relocated themselves to Brooklyn. Welcome to Brooklyn. 1850, Weeksville had more than 500 residents all over the East Coast, as well as two born in Africa. Almost 40% of the residents were Southern born. By 1850, Weeksville had more than 500 residents all over the East Coast, as well as two people born in Africa. Almost 40% of the residents were Southern born. Nearly 1/3 of them were men over 21, owned land. Nearly 1/3 of them owned land, men over 21. In antebellum New York, which nobody talks about, it's always the antebellum South for some reason. In antebellum New York, however, unlike New England, non-white men had to own real property to value $250 and pay tax on it if qualified as a voter. The village had its own churches, including Bethel Tabernacle African, Lord have mercy, Bethel Tabernacle African Methodist Episcopal Church, and Barron Missionary Baptist Church, a school, colored school number 2, now public school 243, a cemetery, and an old age home. Weeksville had one of the first African American newspaper, the Freedom's Torchlight, in 1860s, becoming a national headquarters of the African Civilization Society and Howard Colored Orphan Asylum. In addition, the colored school was the first of such school in the U.S. to integrate both its staff and students. During the violent New York race riot, which we just read, in 1863, the community served as a refuge for many African Americans who fled from Manhattan. Did we not just read that? Should we go back to the race riot? See right here? This is the actual race riot information. I was just reading from Weeksville information to show you that how the New York draft riots, basically Lincoln was recruiting these white Irish men and were not recruiting the black folks. And the jobs were going to the new black labor due to the fact of the Great Migration. The cause of the war, Civil War, conscription, whatever this means, racism, competition for jobs between black and white people. And because of this riot, a lot of white folks, a lot of black people moved out of Manhattan, which we ran Manhattan, and moved out to Brooklyn. Anybody from New York knows this should be like, wow. I had no idea. Weeksville had more than 500 residents from all over the East Coast. In 1860, the national headquarters of the African Civilization Society. The African Civilization Society was an American Black nationalist organization founded by Henry Highland Garrett, Martin Delaney. Are y'all looking at these timestamps though on this shit? In New York City, and served to serve African Americans, founded in 1858. I asked y'all earlier, when I used the word negroes of the 1800s, what's come to mind? You gave me all of this cotton picking thinking. 1858 responds to 1857 Supreme Court decision, Dred Scott case. You forgot about that, right? 1857 Dred Scott case went down. In Sanford, a series of national events in 1850s which negatively impacted African Americans. Its mission was Its mission was to exercise African American self-determination. That was the whole situation. By establishing a colony of free people of color in Yoruba land. The homeland culture of the region, Yoruba people of West Africa, it spans from the modern day country of Nigeria. Now, I'm going to tell you something about this real quick before we even get into this shit. Before we get into this, the African Civilization Society, the Relocation Society, prior to this right here, about going back to Africa, this was prominently pumped out of New York. And this is why, what's the dude name? Marcus Garvey went right to New York to join forces with the African Civilization Society to set up this colony over in Africa. It was a colony, the same as the colonies. It was no difference. It was all a colony. Okay. Now, additionally, the organization, people like W.E.B. Du Bois hated that idea. By the way, W.E.B. Du Bois hated the notion of Negroes leaving America going to Africa. Like W.E.B. Du Bois. I think W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington was definitely not for the Back to Africa movement. That was G. Garvey. He was all by himself on that shit, going back to Africa. But rightfully so, because most Jamaicans and islanders have a more richer African connection. And it is what it is. Nothing to get mad about. It is what it is. Additionally, the organization intended the colony to westernize Africa. I told you this was just a project on its own. It was to take black-looking people who spoke English, wrote English, who were educated in America, to now go over to Africa and try to convince the Africans to do the same thing. It was what do you call it? It was the Trojan horse. The American Civilization Society was a fucking black Trojan horse. That's it. It's a black Trojan horse to convert Africans into thinking the way they think. And this would have just been an Africanized version of psychoneurosis. Combat the African slave trade to create cotton and molasses production economy underwritten by free labor, undermining slavery in the United States in the Caribbean. However, the majority of African Americans remain opposed to immigration programs like theirs. However, the majority of African Americans remained opposed. Everybody I just showed you earlier, the black millionaire from Mississippi, Mr. Weeksville and his people, they were not with that shit. We're not going nowhere. We're not going to go nowhere. So this is 1858. It said it dissolved in 69, but Garvey came back in the 1920s pumping that same RBG message. Background. The American Colonization Society. That's what it was called. So you have the American Colonization Society, and you have the where'd it go? The black nationalists. The black nationalists. I just came across this shit. I can't find it now. Oh, the African Civilization Society. And you had the American Colonization Society, was a white-led organization established in 1816 with the mission of encouraging African Americans, both enslaved and free, to immigrate to West Africa and establish a colony. Liberia, we wanted to go. You're not. The Back to Africa movement was a plight. Black Americans broadly opposed the organization in the Greater Back to Africa movement, which is affiliated. They oppose the American Colonization Society. They also oppose, what's the other one? The African Civilization Society. However, the majority of African Americans remained opposed to immigration programs like theirs. Let's go down here. Black Americans broadly opposed the organization and Back to Africa movement because we're not from fucking Africa. We're not going back there. But this shit kept being pushed. Kept being pushed. And this is the latter part of the 1800s. Then going into the 1900s, you get the eugenics, you get the other white social reformers, you get the what's his name, Francis Boas, Melvin Herkovich, the father of African American history. These YT scholars are now coming in with textbooks and information about how we should go back to Africa anyway. All this was happening in the 1800s. Despite this, some Black community leaders began to look up both more favorable to Liberia declare independence under exclusively Black leadership in 1847. Furthermore, there were a series of events which took place during the 1850s, which led Black leaders such as journalist Martin Delany and Presbyterian minister Henry Howlett Garnett to reconsider immigration. The frequency of free Black Americans being kidnapped and sold into slavery following the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, whereas the Missouri Compromise of 1820 had limited the expansion of slavery into the U.S. territories south of the 36th 30th parallel. Abolitionists were incised when that rule was repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Let's go here real quick. The frequency of free Black Americans being kidnapped and sold into slavery increased. It's the 1850s. We're not talking about the blacks, the transatlantic slave trade no more. We're not talking about that. This is 1850. 1808, slavery outlaw.
According to Wikipedia, 426, enacted March 2nd, 1807, is a United States federal law that prohibited the importation of slaves into the United States. It took effect on January 1st, 1808, the earliest date permitted by the United States Constitution.
1807/1808. Put 1807/1808. The prohibition of importation of slaves is outlawed across the board. No more Africans are coming inside the United States. No more. Everybody was against it at this point. We don't need no more over here. This just North America, by the way. Okay, it's just North America. I know we say transatlantic slave in our mind go to one situation, which I'm doing my best to get you guys out of that thinking pattern. 1808, slavery was outlawed. So if slavery was outlawed in 1808, what do we make of this? What do we make of this right here being said? This is 1850. This is 40-something years, 30-something years after it was prohibited. Why in the 1850s are they still having concerns of Black Americans being kidnapped and sold into slavery in the 1850s? They're still talking about human trafficking in 1850. I'm gonna give y'all a second to catch because I know there's like a 6-second delay on YouTube. My question was, this is 1850. They're talking about the kidnapping and Black people being sold into slavery in 1850, but 1808 they already had outlawed the importation of Negroes from Africa. So who you think being kidnapped and being resold? What is happening right here in this time frame? I'm gonna give you guys time to think about that. What is happening? You guys speculate. And while you guys are thinking about it, I'm just gonna show you what he's talking about in that paragraph. The second domestic slave trade.
According to PBS, that second forced migration was known as the domestic or internal.
This is the one you guys always hear me talk about right here. This was the second forced migration. What was the first forced migration? The first forced migration was the Trail of Tears. Was known as the domestic slave trade or internal. That's not international. That's internal. Internal slave trade. In 7 decades between the ratification of the Constitution of 1787 and 1861. We're talking about 1850. So this fits that time frame. The historian Walter Johnson tells us in his book Soul by Soul: Life Inside Antebellum Slave Market. Domestic slave trade. Let's see how many people were trafficked. How many people were transferred during the domestic slave trade of America?
According to Wikipedia, the internal slave
The internal
trade in
slave
the
trade is
colonies emerged
1760.
in 1760.
It started in 1760 as a source of labor in early America. It estimated between 1790 and 1860, approximately 835,000 slaves were relocated to the American South. Approximately 835,000 people were relocated to the South. So now we should understand when they say that Negroes ran north for freedom, they were running north to go back home. The ones who were relocated from the north, somebody with me. Somebody with me. Thank you. Somebody's following me. And I make that comment because sometimes I get to talking, I feel like I'm not losing you guys. I want to make sure that I'm keeping pace and putting things into its proper perspective, or at least getting you guys to think like, oh shit, what was happening during that time? And training you all to stick with timelines and go in chronological order when you're making your points and when you're having conversation with people. That way you will always appear to be the scholar in the conversation. If you can tell them, well, actually 1790 to 1860, about 835,000 people were transported from the north to the south to help the southern economy. Mostly black people, if not all black people, were relocated. This is why the misnomer of Negroes running north for freedom is not true. They were simply running north to go back home. So this is what they're talking about. This is what they're talking about. This is what made Delaney and Henry Garnett consider it. So much was happening. 1850, people were still being kidnapped, snatched up. Hell, in 1850, you can get your finger cut off for reading. In 1850, you can be thrown in jail for reading and writing. There was so much opposition. However, black communities such as Weeksville still thrive. Weeksville ended up becoming, let's read it real quick. Weeksville is currently working through a working class. Weeksville is currently a working class neighborhood with African Americans and Hispanic residents, as well as Caribbean immigrants from Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, St. Vince, Grenadians, among others. So if you have not done your research on Weeksville, today they call it Brooklyn or Bedford-Stuyvesant today. Founded by a black man, James Weeks. That's our first founder. Our second founder is Isaiah T. Montgomery. Isaiah T. Montgomery was the founder of Mound Bayou, Mississippi, an all-black community. A Republican, he was a delegate in the 1890 Mississippi Constitutional Convention and served as mayor of Mound Bayou. He participated in the 1890 Mississippi Constitutional Convention. You're going to see a lot of constitutional conventions happening right after the Civil War too, because a lot of these states had to rewrite their constitution. South Carolina and Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, they all underwent a rewriting of their constitution, of their state constitution, because their old state constitution was keeping a lot of people out of places. But during Reconstruction, which is what? Black rule. Reconstruction means black rulership. During black rulership of the South, however, Isaiah Thornton Montgomery was the founder. He's the second founder. I give you one founder, James Weeks, who founded Weeksville. And because of Weeksville, we had the Howard Orphanage Asylum. And the Howard Orphanage Asylum is the precursor for Howard University. However, Howard Orphan Asylum in Weeksville, founded by Mr. James Weeks, those children who went to the orphanage at a certain age, probably around 16 to 18, were then transferred to Hampton Indian Institute. So we're seeing the early remnants of our HBCUs. 1890, Mississippi Constitutional Convention. What else happened in 1890? Something else happens in 1890. Well, a lot happened in 1890, so I guess this is a crazy question. He participated in the 1890 Mississippi Constitutional Convention and is a delegate of Broward County and voted for the adoption of the state constitution that effectively disenfranchised black voters for decades. Let's see what he did. He participated in the 1890 Mississippian Constitutional Convention as a delegate from Broward County and voted for the adoptions of the state constitution that effectively disenfranchised black voters for decades, using poll tax and literacy tests to raise the barrier for voter registration. So now, 1890 Mississippi Constitutional Convention, they began to set things in place such as poll tax and literacy tests. Sounds very similar to 1960. Remember 1960s, the same things were happening where Negroes were being resuppressed through education. Now, let's go to our top three. Sorry. 1960s, it was still another struggle for Negroes in what arenas? Social, political, and economical. Late 1800s, same thing happened. 1890, Mississippi Constitution Convention. Mr. Montgomery was a delegate for Broward County and voted for the adoption of the state constitution that effectively disenfranchised black voters for decades. 1890s. So let's go here real quick. Civil rights movement of 1865 to 1896. Please write that down. I'm not talking about the 1960s. I'm not dealing with Martin Luther and Martin. We're not dealing with none of that shit. Bill, we're not dealing with none of that. Same locations, though. We're still dealing with the South, Deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, and parts of Georgia. We're still dealing with the Deep South. But we're talking about the civil rights movement of 1865 to 1896. The civil rights movement of 1865 aimed to eliminate racial discrimination against African Americans, improve their education and employment opportunities, and establish their electoral power. Just after the abolishing of slavery, after the abolishing of slavery in the United States, the period from 1865 to 1895 saw a tremendous change in fortunes of the black community following the elimination of slavery in the South. Immediately after the Civil War, the federal government launched a program known as Reconstruction, which aimed to rebuild the state's former Confederacy. The federal programs also provided aid to former slaves in an attempt to integrate them into society as citizens. Social. Both during and after this period, black people gained a substantial amount of political power. Social and political. Social and political. The three things that adversely affect Negroes from 1865 to 2024: social, political, economical. because black people gained a substantial amount of political power, and many of them were able to move from objective poverty to land ownership. At the same time, resentment of these gains by whites resulted in unprecedented campaigns of violence, which was waged by the local chapter of the Ku Klux Klan of the 1870s, and it was waged by paramilitary groups like the Red Shirts. These are the veterans from World War I was telling you about. These are the veterans from World War I was just speaking about earlier. I just showed you the conditions of YT people during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Between World War I and the Great Depression, they were doing pretty bad. They were doing really bad, actually. So can you imagine, as a YT veteran returning back from World War I, the economy is crap. Your family's eating cabbage soup every night, and you happen to walk around a corner and look over to Tulsa, Oklahoma. These Negroes got on 3-piece suits, Maury Gators. Their cars are clean. They got rims. They having parties and shit. They're not hurting. They ain't even go to World War I. Matter of fact, they're partying. This is what incited these YT people to resort to violence. This is what incites the Jim Crow era. The Jim Crow era didn't start in the 60s, y'all. Why the fuck are we thinking everything about civil rights and Jim Crow was the 60s? Because we don't know. Nobody has taken time to break this shit down to y'all, to show you, like, no, this was happening. This ain't got nothing to do with no 19. This was post-Civil War. This happened. The civil rights movement was going post-Civil War all through World War I and World War II. Y'all just heard about it about the 60s. What do you say, Alfonso? It ain't lost. It ain't lost. I don't buy that. The history ain't lost. It ain't lost, because I'm sitting here showing you guys. I'm showing you guys a lot of the shit right now. That's easy findable. I think we just don't know what to look for. Sometimes we don't know how to connect the dots, and this was making my job so exciting, because I get to sit here and hopefully connect the dots for y'all, and I don't mind doing it. I just want you guys to be able to retain this information and write this stuff down, and then go back and do your own research. That's why I gave you the time frame from 1829 to 1930. We ain't got to go past 1930 with this conversation, because we was running shit in the latter part of the 1800s during the Reconstruction era. Exactly. Shouts to the high priest, man. Don't know what to look for. That's why when I first started 2 hours ago, I asked the audience, if I give you the word Negro in 1800, what's the first thing coming to your mind? You guys gave me some of the dirtiest, nastiest shit I could ever think of. You guys gave me slavery. You guys gave me everything you were supposed to give me, because this is what we think of that time frame. Nobody said civil rights movement in 1800s. Nobody said Martin Delany. Nobody said Weeksville. Nobody said Isaiah T. Montgomery. Nobody even said any of the black founders or the black banks that was happening, the black greatness that was happening from New York all the way down south, because we just don't know, and that's okay. And that's okay. I'm not getting on to y'all for not knowing. I'm showing you, and I just hope that you guys are able to take some of this information and change your perspective on history when it comes to so-called black people of America. Well, right. I agree. Black people gained substantial amount of political power, and many of them were able to move from abject poverty to land ownership. At the same time, resentment of these gains by many whites resulted in unprecedented campaign of violence, which was waged by local chapters of the Ku Klux Klan in 1870, excuse me, was waged by paramilitary groups like the Red Shirts and the White League. Look at them. Paramilitaryist group. They had no political power. Okay, now I'm about to turn the fuck up. They had no political power at this time. Zero political power. I want you guys to take a look at the freaking dates. Write the dates down. Red Shirts, 1875. Other group. 1934 was paramilitary group. They were known as, I'm sorry, the White League. 1874. KKK. 1870s. So you mean to tell me from 1865 to 1870, who, let me calm down, who in the F was running the government of the South? It wasn't YT people. The YT people all got killed. They all got unalived. See, the Civil War happened when General Grant came. General Grant, he burnt that motherfucker to the ground. Everything. Because see, all the YT people of the Confederacy was looked at as traitors. We can't differentiate the YT people of the Confederacy and the YT people of the Union. That's something, that's part of the psychoneurosis. We thinking that these are different individuals. They're the same YT people from the same tree, cut from the same cloth. But that's part of the psychoneurosis. This is the same trick that got y'all thinking that these YT people from Europe sailed over here in 1619, and somehow 89, 92 years later, they're fighting each other. And in your mind, you think the Americans were fighting against the British. There was the British fighting against the damn British. Same YT people fighting each other, fighting their cousins, fighting their older uncles and relatives. So these same YT people settled in the Union. Their Irish cousin settled in the South. And now their YT Irish cousins don't like how their British cousins up north running the country. We're going to succeed from y'all. We want nothing to do with y'all. So now in your mind, you thinking that, okay, these are different kinds of white folks in the South than it is up north. Just like you asked earlier. Well, I asked the question earlier, or there are different Negroes in the North from the South. They were the same Negroes. Same people. Slavery existed in the North the same way it existed in the South. It was more prominent in the South due to things like cotton and agriculture. And because agricultural was the way of living in the South, the Confederacy sought to hold that idealism. Politically, the South needed help. And the resurrection or the Reconstruction that the South needed was Black leadership. And they got their chance to run the South. There was Black leadership in the South. So I asked you, this is 1870. So from 1865 to 1870, who the fuck was running the South? Politically, socially, economically. If all the cotton pickers stayed on the plantation, if all the cotton pickers came back, and I'm not saying it derogatorily, but I'm saying it like, let's call them farmers. Let's not call them slaves. Let's not call them cotton pickers. Let's call them farmers. If all the Black farmers came back, Special Field Order number 15.
According to New Georgia Encyclopedia,
If
Sherman issued Field Order number 15 in January 1865, calling for the
in 1865, is if General Sherman invited, who did he invite back? and we don't want this 1,000 times. He invited 18,000 formerly enslaved families and other. I told y'all, anytime you see the word "in other," there's two types of black folks: the enslaved ones and the free ones. So 18 is charging. So 18,000 formerly enslaved families and other black people got invited back. They confiscated way more than 400,000 acres. First of all, they say along the Atlantic coast, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and divided into parcels more than 40 acres, and of which to be settled approximately 18,000 formerly enslaved black families and other blacks living back then. The order was issued by Sherman, marched to the sea. Sherman burnt every fucking thing. He couldn't stand them Southern whitey people, those Southern traders. Heretics they are. Heresy to go against the Union, to go against the crown. Off with their heads. They were intended to address the immediate problem of dealing with tens of thousands of black refugees. Listen to the language. Y'all went from being called Indians in 1830 when you got kicked off the land. Now they're calling you black refugees when you come back to the land. Can't make this shit up. Who had joined Sherman's march in search of protection and sustenance to assure harmony and actions of the area of operation. Critics allege that the intentions for the order was temporary measures to address the immediate problem and not to grant permanent ownership of the land to the freedmen, although most of the recipients assumed otherwise. General Sherman issued the orders 4 days after meeting with 20 local black ministers and lay leaders. Oh yeah. Most of your black ministers, like Dr. King, were well educated and well versed in politics. In fact, in the black community, they turned to the black church, black ministers and preachers, leadership to help them levy and sometimes overturn decisions in black communities. Like they were the spokespeople for black communities. The black ministers were. That's why you see people. Where is it at? You'll see people like pull it real quick. What's his name? Prince Hall was a black minister. People like Prince Hall would be a Methodist preacher. What was his name? Somebody in the chat help me out. What was the gentleman who got shot before the Revolutionary War? I always forget his name all the time. Got so many names in my head. What was the gentleman name who got shot at the beginning of the Revolutionary War? Come on, help me out, y'all. What was his name? The brother who first Crispus Attucks. It came back to me. Sorry. Crispus Attucks was a Methodist preacher. Crispus Attucks. They come up. Crispus Attucks was a Methodist preacher. Crispus Attucks was a Methodist preacher. What's his name? Nat Turner, preacher. You see a lot of individuals that were religiously associated, but these people were oftentimes the spokesperson for the black community. That was the only point of that, showing you the black clergy, how involved the black clergy was. But anyway, Sherman met with 20 local black ministers and lay leaders, and with the U.S. Secretary of War. The Secretary of War back then was called the War Department, sets up what was known as the Freedmen's Bureau. Okay. General Rufus Saxton, an abolitionist from Massachusetts who had previously organized the recruitment of black soldiers in the Union Army, was put in charge of implementing these orders. Freedmen were settled in Georgia, particularly along the Savannah River and the Ochi district of Chatham County and the island off the coast of Savannah. Now, you guys do realize the reason that this particular sticks out to me, that they were relocating and settling these particular black folks in this area, because this area of Savannah belonged to the Yamacraw Indians. This was the first contact place that James Oglethorpe made when he was found in the state of Georgia. I said that 1,000 times. I just want to kind of, again, rehearse your memory to kind of start putting stuff together. In the end, the orders had little concrete effect because President Andrew Johnson issued a proclamation that returned the lands to Southern owners who took loyal oath. This is how you end up with this. Let's see. Black slaves on a plantation. This, where'd it go? God damn it, where'd it go? There we go. Sorry. They came back to the land. How many? How many came back to the land? 18,000 plus formerly enslaved and other blacks lived in the area came back. Came back to the land. In the end, right here, the order had little concrete effect, because President Andrew Johnson issued a proclamation that returned the lands to white Southerners who took their loyal oath. So now you had 18,000 black families come back on the land, and Andrew Johnson, the 17th president of the United States after Abraham Lincoln, issues a proclamation to return the land back to white folks, which now sequentially these people are already here on the land working. Now you begin the subject of sharecropping and tenant farming. You gave us the land and we're here. We done built our little houses. We done set up shop. We're farming. I look up and see a bunch of white people coming like, why y'all on my, this ain't your land, Negro. Andrew Johnson just reversed the order. It's our land. Well, we ain't finna go nowhere else. We don't got pushed off the land 1830, and our forefathers, we listen, we here, man. I'm not packing up shit. We don't did too much ride. We don't rode from Oklahoma all the way to Savannah. You want us to go back? We're not leaving this territory, Mr. Johnson. We got to work something out. Now, if we just keep working the land and doing our thing and just give you part of what we do, because we know your white ass ain't picking no cotton. And Mr. You right about that, because I'm not getting out there picking no cotton. You're not going to find any pictures of YT people in the cotton fields picking cotton. It's just not their jam. Not the picking of the cotton. They're not the kind of farmers. They had to learn horticulture and agriculture. Why don't you think they don't point out any YT farmers of significance of that time frame? That's why you get what's his name? Peanut Butter Man, Carver. That's why you get George Washington Carver, the number one agriculture, the number one farmer in America. Green Thumb. Now, it was jacked up what they did to the brother when he was younger, but that's another topic. We were the farmers already occupying the land. Now, because Johnson done reversed this order, Andrew Johnson, not Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is way before Johnson. Andrew Jackson was 1830. We're now in 1867, 65, 66. After Lincoln get assassinated, Johnson now takes over. Johnson said, no, let's reverse that shit and get the land back to those loyal, where they at? Oh boy. I click off them already. Let's get the land back to those loyal white folks. This is why it says what it says here. Black people gained a substantial amount of political power, and many of them were able to move from abject poverty to land ownership prior to 1870. How did they become landowners? Due to the fact of the 40 parcels of land. These white liberals from the North are now starting to set these black folks up to be successful. We can't vote because we're not landowners. I give y'all the land. Now y'all the landowners. This is 1865. 1865, Negroes in the South become landowners, giving them the ability to go around anti-literacy laws, also giving them the opportunity, okay, to vote. Black people gained a substantial amount of political power, and many of them were able to move from abject poverty to land ownership. At the same time, these little pickled face YT people are upset they lost the war. And as a result of them losing the war, they're now subjects to black people. The same people they had picking cotton and beating them and calling them boy and spitting on them. And now these same people are about to be in charge of your ass. And this is what incited fear for white America in the 1870s, which then sets up the precursor for the 1920s eugenics movement. This gives rise to people like what's his name? Lothrop Stoddard, Francis Galting, Eugene Fisher. This sets up that whole situation of negative eugenics. We got to exterminate these people. We got to get rid of them. If I got to wake up one more morning to a Negro governor or a Negro senator telling me what to do in my state, well, Pops, y'all lost the war. We didn't lose the war. No, y'all lost the goddamn war. But to redo the Reconstruction, to hit this historical part, Daughters of the Revolution, these heifers start going around spreading war stories about the Civil War. They begin to start telling a whole nother history about the different wars in America. They start propagating a whole nother history. In fact, they were the ones that put up all the Civil War monuments that we started tearing down a little bit a couple years ago. They became that benevolent society of white women that began to propagate the crazy side of history, like they was really doing something. I'm showing you the other side of history. They had to go create this stuff. They had to go make it up. The National Society of Colon Dames of America, the Mayflower Society, the Preservation of Virginia, the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They're telling the other side of the fucking history. The lying side is an American neo-Confederate, new Confederate, hereditary association for females, descendants of Confederate soldiers, engaging in commemoration of these ancient and the founding monuments of them. They were the ones that put up all those damn monuments throughout America. Those stone statues of Stonewall Jackson and all those jokers, Stone Mountain. They began to give you the other side of the history. That BS part of history. What I'm showing you is where it go. Why do I keep losing it? I'm showing you the other side of it. Black people gained substantial amount of political power before 1870. They began to tell a false narrative of history, dealing with the damn Civil War and all that shit. They did that, Daughters of America. You see right here that we rule the South and we were founders. Isaiah T. Montgomery, founder. Mr. James Weeks, founder. 1888 to 1902. He was described as Mississippi's Booker T. Washington. He was born into slavery, however. And he and his brother, older brother, William Thornton Montgomery, were sons of Ben Montgomery, a slave who owner was Joseph Davis, promoted him to overseer. His daddy became the overseer for Mr. Joseph Davis plantation, the Davis plantation. The Montgomery children learned to read and write. The Montgomery children learned to read and write due to their father's influence position with Mr. David Ben. On David Ben plantation. Davis wanted to establish more positive working environment for slaves and encourage education. Wait a minute. I thought it was, and this is in Georgia, by the way. Mississippi, by the way. Sorry, Mississippi, by the way. But I thought there were anti-literacy laws that we couldn't do that. You see, even though there were anti-literacy laws, they were still being taught to read and write. Following the end of the American Civil War, Isaiah began a business with his father. I just showed you the other 7 to 8 black business owners during this time frame. Prior to Weeksville, Tulsa, Oklahoma, we have not showed Tulsa, Oklahoma, not one time. It lasted to Ben's death to 1877. His father had a long dream of establishing an independent black colony. By the time of his death, the Reconstruction era had ended, and African Americans struggled to maintain themselves against white supremacy. Montgomery married Martha Robb. Their daughter, Mary Connelly Montgomery Booth, was a political organizer. They began to struggle to maintain themselves with white supremacy. White supremacy began to raise its ugly head. And let me tell you about the Daughters of the American Revolution. They all came up out of the women's suffrage movement, by the way. Not black women. These were YT women. And in the 60s, they ended up manipulating the black women to join the women's movement. Come on, girl, come over and join us. Like, fuck them men. We don't need no men. That's when it started with the sisters in the 60s. 1920s, nobody was suffering. We were not suffering. Our women weren't suffering at all. Our women were doing pretty well for themselves, doing damn well. I don't think Josephine Baker would agree with this in the 1920s about black women's suffrage. It's white women's suffrage in the 1920s due to World War I, due to the economy crashing, due to the Great Depression, due to the fact they had to stand in lines and eat cabbage water and bread. And that's why I showed you a second ago, that's why the welfare system was created for white women who were suffering. If white men weren't working, half of them weren't coming back from war, abusers, wife beaters, so on and so forth. Daughters of the American Revolution began to tell a whole other history about the Civil War, and to begin to put up these Civil War monuments and statues. Isaiah T. Montgomery. Got him wrote down. Reconstruction era, which is black rule. I'm gonna wrap it up with this right quick. Now let's talk. Oh, I got one more person. I'm sorry. Sylvia Smith, Mr. Smith, 1831 to 1911. Mr. Smith. Right there, Mr. Smith, by the way. He's 3 people. Sorry about that. In order to attain the right to vote, which was denied to most African Americans in New York and across the nation at the time, Smith led a group of free blacks in purchasing land in a rural area of Kings County, New York. In 1838, 11 years later, New York finally abolished slavery. Smith and other African Americans, including Peter and Benjamin Kroger, William Wilson James Pendleton, James and Elizabeth Gloucester, and William and Willis Hodge lived in the community of Williamsburg, Fort Greene, and Cobble Hill. They gave up their urban extensive to create a small middle-class farming community, which they called Weeksville after James Weeks, an African-American settler from Virginia, who was the earliest landowner resident in the area. Farming was only part of the motivation for Weeksville settlement. By purchasing the land, the family ensured they met up to $250 properties requirement from voting, establishing in 1821 New York legislation solely for black males in the state. Weeksville is now part of Bedford-Stuyvesant and Weeksville Farm Sanovis, and Anna Springston Smith was the corner of West now Fulton Street and Buffalo Avenue. So he's a part of the establishment for Weeksville too. I meant to put him with Mr. Weeksville. So we have him, James Weeks. We have Isaiah T. Montgomery. We now know that just opposed of oppositions to such as anti-literacy laws that was happening in the South. The civil rights of 1865, not 1965, was happening. And this says in this passage that Black people gained a substantial amount of political power, and many of them were able to move from poverty to land ownership. That's what I want to focus on. And as a result of them gaining this tremendous political momentum that gave rise to white hatred, the ideals of white supremacy, the idea of new legislation, Black Christian codes, so on and so forth. But that didn't happen until the 1870s. So from 1865 to 1870, we have to find out what was going on in the South. Places like Mississippi, the place where Isaiah T. Montgomery founded Mound Bayou. It was called Mound Bayou, by the way, with Isaiah T. Montgomery. He founded Mound Bayou. That's the community you want to keep in mind, Mississippi. Also in Mississippi, Hiram Revels. Same time period. He's the first African-American senator of Mississippi. 1870. See that? 1870. 1870s. 1870. Hiram Revels of Mississippi becomes the first African-American senator in 1870. Many whites resulted in unprecedented campaigns of violence, which was waged by local chapters of Ku Klux Klan, and in the 1870s, it was waged by paramilitary groups like the Red Shirts and the White League. These 1870s paramilitary group sets up the catalyst for the 1920 destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But in 1870, while that white propensity anger was building, fortunately for us, we had peoples in place like Hiram Revels in Mississippi, who was the born free. He was a freeman, by the way, born in the great state of North Carolina. And he was also a part of the Constitutional Convention also. 1870, Black Rule. Watch this. We got to get out of here in a second. Watch this, though. Black Rule. Prostrate states. Let me go back out of this article real quick. I think I shared this article. I'm not sure. The prostrate states, South Carolina, under Negro government. Not just South Carolina, it was also Mississippi. Hiram Revels was in place. He's 1874. Hiram Revels was still the senator of Mississippi in 1874. You see this table of content. This is the actual document right here. I could send you the document if you shoot me an email or shoot me that Cash App. $3 challenge. 3 pesos. 3 pesos. I'm gonna go to page 14 because I got there. Here's the table of content. Black Parliament, Negro legislation, vigilance of state government. Sambo was critical on the white man. The raw Negro as legislation. That's why you will never see a raw Negro run for president. You know, Obama doesn't represent the population of Negroes in America, and nor does Kamala Harris. They don't represent the real Black people of America. Like descendants of slaves will never, ever, ever again be able to seek an office that high. The raw Negro is legislator, his qualities and qualifications, his ignorance and corruption. The highest style of legislation, spoliation, is as well understood. The South Carolina legislation was in Tammany Conclave. That's not what I want to read, though. But I can send you this entire thing. That's the point I'm making right now. Let me go to page 14. We can wrap this up. Page 38, page 14. Black Parliament, Negro Parliament. That's 14, 18. Okay. What's right here? All right. We'll go to 14. So this is on page 14. Price rate stays starting at the bottom. Deducting 23 members referred to who comprise the entire strength of the opposition, we found 101 remaining. Of this 101, 94 are colored. 7 of them are white allies. Thus, the blacks outnumbered the whole body of whites in the House and more than 3-1. On mere basis of numbers, the injustice of the diaspora is manifest, since the black population is relatively 4-3 of whites, meaning we were going to the meetings, we was handling business. A just ratification of this aspiration on the basis of population merely would give 54 whites and 70 black members. And the line of race, very near the marks on the line that hostile politics. As things stand, the body is almost literally a black parliament, and it is only one of the face of the earth which the representative of the white consistency is professed exponent of the advanced type of modern civilization. But the reader will find almost any proportionitude inadequate to give a vivid idea of the body and enable him to comprehend the complete metamorphosis of the South Carolina legislation without observing its details. The speaker is black, the clerk is black, the doorkeepers are black, the little pages are black, the chairman of the ways is black, and the means is black, and the chaplain a coal black. At some of the desks sits colored men whose types would be hard to find outside of the Congo, whose customs, visitors, attitudes, and expression only befit the forecastle of a buccaneer. It must be remembered also that these men, with not more than half a dozen expectations, have been themselves slaves, and their ancestors were slaves for generations. Recollecting the report of the famous schooner Wander fitted out by the southern slaveholder 12 or 15 years ago. This room was full of Negroes. Everybody black in the Carolina legislation. This is called South Carolina under Negro government. And I'd advise you to look up the other states like Mississippi and Georgia, who all fell into the hands of a black government during Reconstruction, aka Black Rule. All right, fam lamb. We didn't really get into time to talk about Marcus Delaney. Another day, another time. Black nationalism. I want to save him for Marcus Garvey and the idea of black liberalism, black liberals, black nationalism, the RBG movement. He was born as a free person. He was born as a free person of color in Charlestown, Virginia. Free man, never been a slave. This is Martin Delaney. Look him up. We didn't get a chance to deal with him. Of course, the good brother Hiram Revels, 1870. Now you kind of can start to understand that what was happening in the latter part of the 1870s. We were still running shit, pretty much. So I appreciate y'all. For those of you all who committed to the $3 challenge earlier on, if you feel like you have a new insight on history or a new way to think about it, the Cash App is at the bottom. I appreciate y'all so much for tapping in with me. Ms. Smith, thank you for being transparent earlier with your information. I hope you learned a little bit more. For those of you who are, I call it my know-it-alls. Everybody know everything now. Thank y'all for surviving with me. Appreciate y'all. Look up Harper's Weekly political cartoon about Hiram. They call him a more than. Interesting. Interesting. I think I'm gonna do that right now, real quick. Harper's Weekly political cartoon of Hiram rebels. Harper's Weekly political cartoon of Hiram rebels. Hold on. Oh, that's crazy. I know y'all can't see it. Time wanders where to suspect. Let's see. Oh shit, it's right there. Here it is. Wow, that's crazy. Let me put your comment down so you can see it real quick. Let me blow up the screen for y'all. It says it right there at the bottom. For that I suspect the lusty Moor hath leaped into my seat, that thought wherefore doeth like poison minerals gnaw my inwards. Okay, first of all, let's just bust up this cartoon right quick. This is supposed to be Hiram Revels right here. He's the new Senator Revels. This is depicting Jefferson Davis, supposedly calling Hiram Revels a lusty Moor for taking his seat. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Union at this time. In fact, in 1870, once Hiram Revel officially took the seat of senator, when was Jefferson Davis captured?
May 10th, 1865. According to Britannica, at dawn on May 10th, 1865, Davis was captured near Irwinville, Georgia. He was imprisoned in a damp casemate at Fort Monroe, Virginia, and was put in leg irons. Though outraged Northern public opinion brought about his removal to healthier quarters, Davis remained a prisoner under guard for 2 more years.
He got locked up, transferred to Fort Sumter, North Carolina. He was imprisoned at damp casemate in Fort Monroe, Virginia, also known as Fort Comfort. He was in jail. Great information, though, man. Appreciate y'all so much again. Thank y'all so much for tapping in with your boy. Until next, what time is it? I didn't get a chance to do the Monday. I'm supposed to come up for the Monday review situation. I forgot about the Monday review. The Monday movie review. I apologize. The Monday movie review. I'm not gonna be able to do it tonight because I took so long on this right here. But I promise you, going forward on Mondays, I'm gonna implement a Monday movie night review. Random movies. It could be Juice, Boys in the Hood, 12 Years a Slave, Django, They Clone Tyrone. I'm still looking for a co-host to help do the movie review. If you're interested in co-hosting the movie review, hit me up. But unfortunately, I'm gonna go ahead and take it off for tonight. I am pooped. Absolutely. Thank you for tapping in. Absolutely. That's all it was. Bunch of hatred. So listen, man, be sure to get over to the Cash App at the bottom right here. Appreciate y'all. 1,000 grand. Shouts out to Cromland, Crom TV. Thank y'all for being on here, man. You guys have an amazing Sunday night. MOI out.